Thank you, Tim. If this exit is unavailable or the alarm goes off when you are at or near reception, please use the main exit doors, the way you came in. The assembly point is on Portwall Lane. You will be accompanied by a member of staff. Thank you. So I'd like to welcome everybody to this Combined Authority Audit Committee meeting. Let's start by testing the microphones and introducing members, please. So going that way, could you state your name and where you're from, please?
Councillor Shabalala, Bristol.
Councillor Toby Simon, Bath and North East Somerset.
Councillor Jonathan Hacker, Bristol.
Stephen Williams, Councillor for Bristol City Council.
Emily Clark, Bristol City Council.
Councillor Tom Blenkinsop, Bristol City Council.
David Addison, Councillor South Gloucestershire.
Mark Hatscliffe, Independent Member.
Councillor John Leach, Bath and North East Somerset.
And I'm Councillor David Wilcox, representing Lockleys Ward in the fine city and county of Bristol. Shall we go now on to officers, please?
I'm Steve Hallard, Deputy Monitoring Officer.
I'm Solange Russell, I'm the Director of Finance.
Tim Milgate, Democratic Services.
James Kinane-Nealon, Head of Finance.
Steve Finnegan, Financial Accountant.
Sophie Morgan Barrack, External Audit Manager.
Pete Barber, Grant Thornton, External Audit Lead.
Peter Khan, Head of Internal Audit.
I'm Alec Austin, Internal Audit Manager.
Thank you. And no apologies have been received today, so we're expecting some extra councillors to arrive and they'll sit down there, if that's all right with everybody. Do any members have any declarations of interest to declare in relation to any of the agenda items? No, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of December. Do members have any matters of accuracy they wish to raise about the previous minutes? Are the committee content to agree these minutes as a true and accurate record? Thank you for proposing, Tony. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Jonathan. So let's move on to item 4, items from the public. There were 14 questions received from members of the public in advance of this meeting. Responses to those questions have been published and circulated. In addition, 4 statements were received. Again, these have been published and circulated in advance of this meeting. A number of members of the public are in attendance and wish to address the committee. Are they here? Andrew Lynch has arrived in the nick of time. You're just about to make your statement, Andrew. That's all right.
Morning. 2 points today that elaborate on my statement about FOIs. The authority's senior officers now seem to resemble members of the royal family. They never apologise and they never explain. When the authority was asked last year about a possible workplace culture review ordered during the last mayor's chaotic tenure, officers denied it. That was last June. By January this year, the officers were confirming spending on preparing the review that they denied. Why would they deny it? You can see from the response to my first question today that these officers don't think it's this committee's role to ask why inaccurate information is being provided for FOI requests. I would be delighted if members could prove them wrong. The response to my question about when the chief executive knew about the workplace culture review is astounding. It suggests he was unaware of the Employment and Appointments Committee decision to order a review, despite the fact he was chief executive of Bristol City Council at the time, and thus would have been very close to the subject. Furthermore, the chief executive would have been briefed about the review when he took up his current job. And I know his forgetfulness can extend to a whole Grant Thornton report that was critical about this authority and the mayor that he so zealously supported. But the suggestion he can't remember he knew about the intended review is bizarre. The suggestion that the chief executive knew even historically leads one to wonder why initial inaccurate responses were made to the 2025 FOI request by myself and one other person. I'm sure members will have noted how well never apologising and never explaining has worked for the royal family. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And that concludes the items from the public item. And now I'd like to move on to chair's announcements and reporting back from the main committee. And yes, I did attend the main committee on the 30th of January 2026 in this very room, and I did report back on progress that we made on several items, and my statement is a matter of written record on the main committee's minutes. This committee can be a word salad of acronyms. To help the meeting flow, if people use an acronym, could they please explain what it stands for? I'll make a start with explaining these ones. WECA, which is the West of England Combined Authority. MCA, which is the Mayoral Combined Authority, a shortcut for WECA. Unitary Authority, the councils that make up the MCA. Bristol, Baines, Bath and North East Somerset, South Gloss, and soon to be, hopefully, North Somerset. Then we have MHCLG, which is the Ministry of Housing, Communities and also Local Government. Then there's another couple of acronyms that come up, which is this CRSTS, which is the City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlement, and TCR, which is the Transport for City Regions, which is the new method of delivering sustainable transport solutions to MCAs. I'd then like to move on to item 6, which is a membership update. We would like to receive an update on the committee's membership following the resignation of one of the independent members. And Tim Milgate will, no, he won't. Mark Hatcliffe will be speaking to this one item. Oh, okay, thank you, Tim.
Yes, good. Good morning, committee. This report is just giving a brief update to the committee regarding its membership. We received notice in January that one of the 3 independent members of the committee had sent in her resignation, Christine Fraser. This one of the 2 remaining independent members' terms was due to end in May of this year, which meant that after that time the committee would be down to 1 independent member. So this report is just asking whether the committee is willing to extend Mark Hatcliffe's term of membership just on a temporary basis until recruitment of new independent members could take place.
Mr. Hatcliffe, would you want to say something?
Yeah, I guess just following on from what Tim said there, yeah, my term was due to end, or is due to end fairly shortly. The meeting was convened on the, I think it was the 2nd of February. I have agreed to stay on as an independent member whilst the recruitment process takes place. The new incumbent or incumbents are recruited and then embedded into the role, and at that stage we'll have the discussion about my termination. That's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcliffe. So we have a couple of recommendations that we note the resignation of the independent member Christine Fraser, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank her for her contributions to this committee, and that the Combined Authority be requested to extend the term of membership for the independent member Mark Hatcliffe for up to a further year to no later than the end of 26-27, which is quite vague, to allow for a decision to be made on the committee's terms of reference and the authority's constitution by the Combined Authority and recruitment activities to take place. So that's a voting item, Tim? Yes. So all those against extending the term of Mark Hackcliffe? All those for? Excellent. I think that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. And the committee agree in principle to continue to follow the SIPFA guidance to have at least 2 independent members appointed. And I've used an acronym there, and I can't remember what SIPFA stands for off the top of my head. Who would like to?
Chartered Institute for Public Finance and Accountants, I believe.
Thank you, Solange. So we'll move on to item 7, which is the quarterly Corporate Risk Register and Corporate Risk Framework Annual Review. To present the Corporate Risk Register CRRR, which is a standing quarterly item for the committee's consideration.
Yeah, so can we ask all officers to sit up here when presenting their papers today, please? Thank you.
Those seats could well become occupied. And to provide an update on the revised corporate risk management framework, including an overview of the key changes arising from the annual review and ongoing enhancements to the authority's risk management approach. And Abby Evans will be speaking to this item, please.
Good morning, thank you, Chair and members of the committee. So this report provides your quarterly assurance on the Corporate Risk Register and seeks your feedback on the strengthened corporate risk management framework. So I will begin with the register and pause for questions before turning to the framework refresh. So the Corporate Risk Register continues to focus on 9 material risks. Those that either cut across the directorates or pose a significant threat to delivery of our statutory duties and strategic priorities. The 2 highest risks remain CRR 14, the CRSTS delivery, and CRR 20 around Bristol Temple Quarter development. Their inherent ratings reflect the scale, complexity, and financial exposure. All risks are high before mitigation, and after mitigation, only CRR 14 remains high, recognising that delivery risks at this scale cannot be fully neutralised, only actively managed. In terms of quarterly key movements, there are 3 substantive updates this quarter. Firstly, with CRR 8, which is the climate and nature integration risk, that has been reframed to focus explicitly on MCA's direct governance responsibilities. The risk now centres on failure to embed climate resilience across strategic planning, planning and transport, and place-based investment. So this replaces a broader outcomes-based framing and strengthens accountability, clarity, and auditability. This risk has been on the register for some time, so a deeper review was required and ownership has changed. And a further paper next on the agenda, led by the risk owners, will set out the refined scope. Secondly, CRR 10, our recruitment, retention and workforce diversity risk, now reflects workforce stability during the transition to our target operating model, particularly around retention and organisational resilience through significant change. Mitigations now place increased emphasis on evidence-led workforce planning, strengthened talent acquisition and employer branding, and clearer internal career pathways, as well as structured onboarding and induction. Thirdly, the final update on the CRR is CRR 4 around business continuity and cyber resilience. Members requested a review of this last quarter. We have reviewed this and it remains appropriately scored. Mitigations are robust, however, the external threat landscape limits further reduction in the residual exposure. We have a closed session planned for this further in the summer. We'll be able to explore in more detail the treatment plan for that risk. The remaining risks are stable with no material change in underlying exposure, but all mitigations have been updated. So, Chair, I'll pause there in case there's any questions in relation to the register before turning to the framework refresh.
Thank you, Abby. Any questions pertaining to risks on the register, please? Mr. Hallett.
Just interested on the CR20. One of the mitigation actions is that an experienced private sector partner is being procured. What's the process that is being taken to ensure that the right private partner is being secured for that?
Can I ask the Director of Place, John Wilkinson, to answer that if it's okay?
So just so everybody is aware, while John takes a seat, I think up front, the CRR20 is the MCA is exposed to significant financial and delivery risks in the 90 million phase 1 of the Bristol Temple Quarter regeneration scheme. And Appendix 2 will show you the detailed mitigations around that risk.
Sorry, good morning, everyone. First of all, I'm John Wilkinson, I'm the Director of Place. So the LLP, Bristol Temple Quarter LLP, has been through a fully compliant, transparent procurement process. And this update was written prior to the announcement that I think many of you will have seen that Muse have been appointed as the private sector partner to deliver phase 1 of Bristol Temple Quarter.
Do you have a supplementary, Mark?
I guess what was the process to ensure that they are the right private partner in terms of obviously a high risk activity here, and just to ensure that it's being done in the correct way?
Yes, so that was led by the LLP, which is the partnership between ourselves, Bristol City Council and Homes England. So it went through a fully compliant, open procurement process. So and all the bids were assessed in the usual way. All of that information will be made available by the LLP. So it was a lengthy and very detailed process involving procurement experts, financial experts, commercial experts. So yeah, it was done in the normal manner.
Councillor Simon.
Sorry, thank you. If there was a major engineering problem to arise, a sewer you hadn't been aware of or something like that, where does risk lie on that project?
So it's one of the reasons why this is so high on our risk register. So there's a grant funding agreement which is worth £95 million, which is a grant from Homes England for the delivery of the early stage infrastructure. The risk of cost overrun on that grant funding agreement rests with us as the combined authority, because the LLP is not a kind of formal legal entity in the sense that it can't hold money. It's a partnership. We stand behind that grant funding agreement. So one of the reasons why we're taking it so seriously is because that risk falls ultimately from a cost perspective on us.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I was just going to ask there then. So in terms of the CRR20, what is that financial value, and how are we making sure that there's alternative funding sources to be considered?
So we're keeping the financials constantly under review. So the 95 million is the grant funding which is available for that infrastructure. So that's supported the delivery of the new station entrances, some of the land assembly costs, the costs of the LLP team. So there's a very detailed profile that sits behind what that 95 million will go towards. The combined authority has also previously provided financial support, as has Homes England in other ways. So essentially, that's the envelope at the moment, and we are working very closely with the LLP to ensure that the costs remain within that overarching envelope. If we get any signs that costs are increasing, there are unexpected things found underground, then clearly that's something that we will register, and we will take to the LLP board and the partners there to seek further funding. I should say that Homes England are a very, very active partner in this. They sit on the LLP board. They are one of the LLP's partners, and clearly, as the government agency with a leading role in the delivery of homes in the UK, we would be looking for them for significant support if that scenario were to arise.
Yeah, I guess maybe this is a question that cuts through a number of the risks, is the financial spillover. Although the account's showing quite a positive kind of growth at this point in time, I'm just concerned if maybe some of those funds from the authority now, with the good accounts, may actually lead into supporting some of these unforeseen gaps, especially through the devolution amounts, also in terms of the costs that other local authorities may be suffering. And maybe this then helps to plug. And then you've got, as you said, the place-based investment, you've got quite a number of major projects. So should there be further spillage, how would the local authority manage not to get involved with its own money and then focus on funding sources elsewhere?
Yeah, so we're keeping all of that constantly under review. So there are, if that scenario arose, there are clearly options for us to take forward. As I say, just to reiterate, we've put this so high on the risk register for the reasons that you describe, and we think we're managing it effectively at the moment. If there were unexpected costs, then we are all committed to making sure that we deliver Bristol Temple Quarter. It is a huge and significant opportunity for the city and the region. So the partners will work through any of those kind of risks that materialise.
Councillor Addison.
Thank you, Chair. If I could, I'd like to ask a question on CRR 14, the CRSTS programme. I notice we have a mitigation in place, which is to amend the programme end date to March 2029. And in spite of that, the residual risk is still 16, which seems very high. Does that mean you see a significant risk that we would not be able to complete the CRSTS programs by March 2029? Or is there still some work to go on that one?
Yeah, so there is a paper that is coming on CRR 14 later on the agenda. So the lead owners might be able to reflect in a bit more detail later on the agenda. But what I can say is that the residual rating reflects the programme's complexity scale at the moment and external dependency. Risk is actively managed through milestones assurance, financial oversight and robust controls, but cannot be fully limited. We are managing active threats and doing the best we possibly can. I won't say more than that because I think there will be a chance to look at that in more detail on a future agenda item today.
Thank you.
Solange, do you want to come in on that?
Only to reiterate that we do have our Executive Director of Transport here with a head of to talk to the CRSTS so they can pick it up.
Grant, any more questions about specific risks? And Councillor Addison, could you switch your microphone off, please? No? Could we then move on to the framework, please?
Yeah. So the annual refresh of the corporate risk framework is more than routine housekeeping this year. It strengthens the clarity of our risk architecture and sharpens how we define, assess and escalate risk. The revisions reflect engagement with the corporate leadership team, the corporate risk review group made up from members across different directorates and audit committee members at our February workshop. The key enhancements are clearer and more structured risk categories, refined risk appetite statements, the introduction of residual risk thresholds, and stronger and more explicit escalation triggers, as well as the formal introduction of opportunity risk. Collectively, these changes create clearer boundaries between acceptable and unacceptable exposures and improve consistency in how our risks are allocated and managed. Importantly, this will materially improve what you see once approved, as future reporting will clearly identify where residual risks exceed appetite, supported by defined thresholds. So that will help in terms of risk prediction and classification and treatment plans. This will not only enhance committees' line of sight over material risks, but improves oversight and insurance, enabling the Mayor and the corporate leadership team to make better informed, timely decisions grounded in clear risk intelligence. We will also ensure that staff are appropriately supported through the transition, including guidance, tools and insurance of capability uplift where needed, so that the changes are embedded effectively and sustainably across the organisation. So the focus on the update of the framework is phase 1 of an organisational improvement plan work stream. And phase 2 is concentrated on embedding culture, capability and digital enhancement. So today we ask the committee to approve the framework and provide feedback on that ahead of its submission to main committee and the implementation of this in this summer. Stop there and see if there's any questions.
Any questions specifically about the framework? Councillor Sabala.
Yeah. So in terms of CRR 5, CRR 19, and mainly those two, what is the time gap in between the strategic leaders or the unitary authorities really being able to, if something is triggered, to make a decision effectively and not prolong decisions? Is there a risk element in that? Is there a specific timeline in which risks needs to be or decisions needs to be made? Should they be escalated?
Yep. So in terms of the escalation and review process for risks, we have the corporate risk register is reviewed quarterly, but at a CLT level and through this audit committee. But before that, there are active management at risks at directorate level, and the new thresholds will trigger whether it's going to be an acceptable level and what action is required if it meets one of those, if it hits one of the tolerances, additional escalation is needed. So there is review on a monthly basis with heads of service on the high level risk within their directorates. If that risk is already sat on the corporate risk register group, they are looked at on a quarterly basis. Obviously, if anything happens in between, there is a procedure for allowing risks that can be talked about our weekly corporate leadership team meetings if additional scrutiny is required at that level. So there's a number of routes, but there is a set parameters for when tolerances have been exceeded and you need to escalate things to, first of all, your head of service, your director, and then at that point it would hit the corporate risk review group that do some assurance and calibration on the risk scoring, and if necessary it would be then highlighted to the corporate leadership team.
I'm still not sure how long that timeline scale, the timeline of that period is, because, for example, there's the transport schemes have got a very clear definitive time when they need to be procured by.
Yes, so sorry, I think I can explain by saying the risks have got their own projects and risk registers, so you're not seeing that at this level. So there's individual actions. So for example, CRSTS will have a number of detailed project schemes and project risk registers with more detail across the risks across that spectrum of work. We are articulating that at a very high level of what you see on the CRRR, but behind that is a huge amount of work with the officers in working with our UAs to effectively manage them on much more than a quarterly basis. This is active work that's happening week in, week out with the transport team.
I just want to clarify that in terms of this risk, are we assuming that decision making wouldn't make part of the risk because it's been mitigated well enough? That decision making and the time of decision making is effectively well managed. So it shouldn't be decision making, it should be something out of our control completely.
Then there might be a requirement for decision making internally within CLT, and that will be managed as required. But we're doing that in conjunction with CLT, and if necessary, it can be escalated up within our quarterly reporting time frame. Does that help? Okay.
Any more questions about the framework? I have a couple. On page 28, paragraph 11, there's a table of the risk register responsibilities. I'm interested to understand why there is an owner and then there's somebody who's actually responsible for actioning the risk, the CRRG rep. Why isn't the actual owner of the risk on as part of the CRRG, please?
So we can have risk. We do have risk owners and risk action owners as well. The ultimate responsibility lies with the risk owner in terms of oversight of that risk, but there will be actions at a high level for directorates and teams from the person that is responsible for actioning those, and they feed in directly to that director or owner of that risk regularly. I think there are a number of different people involved in the management of all of these risks, but we need to have clear role and responsibility. So we have decided through the framework that an action and lead owner would make sense in this scenario.
So it's not a a devolution of responsibility for the risk that's being implied by this graph, by this table rather?
No, ultimately, the risk owner and director is responsible for the risk within their area. There'll be assigned people that help action and deal with the treatment plan for those risks, and they are the risk action owners. Okay.
And where does the Chief Operating Officer and the Mayor actually fit into this table, please?
So there are updates quarterly to the corporate leadership team, and at the same time we update the Mayor on our corporate risk register. She's also been informed of the framework update, so she has requested for oversight of all of this assurance pathway for risk, and she is actively involved in our planning and treatment plans where required. So she speaks to Solange and myself regularly on a quarterly basis on all of the risk information and intelligence that we are gathering, that you also see and we share with you.
That is heartening to hear. Thank you. I also have a question about paragraph 24, which is on page 33. I'm concerned about the minimalist risk appetite for IT. The second one from the bottom. I don't think that really qualifies the risk, the resultant risk that could happen by an IT breach. So can we have someone to justify why that's a minimalist, a low risk appetite, please?
Yeah, we can look at that in more detail. We've made revisions to the risk appetite for this particular category. So the business critical systems and IT infrastructure was previously operational systems. So we recognise that the availability and integrity of all of our business critical information systems is absolutely essential to us delivering our services effectively. We have reinforced a link between system reliability and strategic delivery, maintaining a low tolerance for disruption. So I think it's a way that it can be read in terms of we absolutely want to stay within a very low residual risk appetite for strict controls to ensure system integrity. And actually we set quite, our tolerance level for this is 10, which means that anything above that, and if you can see the scores on the corporate risk register, most things are 12 or above, that would already exceed our risk appetite in the new framework. So I think that shows that we know that we need to be resilient and adapt to the risks in this area, and that actually our appetite remains cautious.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Any more questions about the framework that people want to raise? Councillor Shabalala?
No one else. It's really great to see the communication and partnership. I remember we discussed that briefly last time, and you mentioned that that's something that you're working on. I wonder if you can kind of touch on the risk appetite of the communication and partnership approach, especially in terms of making sure that the wider public are aware of the roles and responsibilities of the combined authority.
We could. Yeah, let me just I'll find the details. So Appendix 4 gives you some rationale for our changes around this particular item, and I'm just trying to lay my hands on it. So communications and partnership. So we have changed that to, so it covers, as you say, media coverage, entering partnerships, partnership behaviour, leaks of confidential information to the media or the public. And we recognise the vital importance of effective communications and strong trusted partnerships in this area. So we've changed it. We haven't shifted the actual appetite statement. That remains as cautious, medium risk appetite statement. The revised statement shifts from a narrow focus on protecting reputation and avoiding adverse publicity to a broader, more proactive emphasis on strategic, well-managed communications and partnerships. In terms of messaging around communications and branding, we probably would need to get someone within that team and a lead risk owner to provide you with more information about the plans around that, but it certainly is ongoing work in that area.
If helpful, we have our Director of Operations here who is leading on comms at the moment. I can ask him to come up and provide more information. Chair?
I'd be interested, please, yeah.
Okay, so that would be Ben Mosley.
Good morning. Hello. So we've taken a number of steps in the last 18 months, but it is appropriate that the risk appetite is medium. One of the steps we've taken, which I think I've previously spoken to committee about, is we have developed and implemented a communications protocol with the unitary authorities. Historically, the lack of a communications protocol has been a source of quite a lot of regrettable misalignment between this authority and the unitary authorities. What we now have is a protocol that when we wish to make an announcement, we communicate our intention to the appropriate communications teams, and we ask for the political leads to contribute if they wish to do so, and we give them a time frame to contribute to that story. The other thing we've done is we've restructured the communications team as it is. So it's a communications and marketing team with a public affairs section to it. That restructure has now been implemented with only, I think, 2 vacancies left to be appointed to.
Thank you, Ben. Any more questions?
No, that's great to know.
Thank you. So we have if there's no more questions, so we have a couple of recommendations on page 25. One, that the committee notes and comments on the corporate risk register, which is what we've done, I think. And 2, that the committee notes the updated corporate risk management framework and provides comments or feedback to support its further developments. Now, Abby did say that we might need to endorse this. So do we need to actually vote on this particular framework? Can I have some guidance, please? Okay. So who would like, can I have a proposer and a seconder for this vote, please? Who would like to propose this vote? Councillor Stribashala, can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Addison, thank you. And so I'd like to see hands that are against this corporate risk framework, and votes to abstain, and votes for to endorse it, please. Thank you. I think it's unanimous, Tim.
Thank you all, much appreciated.
Yes. Thank you. So I'd like to move on to item 8, which is the corporate risk CRR8 review. Following the review of this risk, this report sets out the rationale for revising the risk to strengthen its focus on delivery of targets, strategies and plans, and how the revised risk improves clarity around delivering risk and assurance. A summary of the current and planned mitigations and controls that support effective delivery. Abby Evans, Emma Blackman, and John Wilkinson to present. And of course, this is all about climate change.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll just set a few sort of contextual comments and then be really happy to take any questions that you've got on this. So I think the paper sets out clearly the review that we've undertaken. So back in 2023, the risk that was on the risk register in relation to this area, as you can see in the paper, talked about the Mayoral Combined Authority's financial resources, actions and plans not fully addressing the climate and ecological emergency. That's been reviewed in order to take an approach where we want to assess the risk which is more directly within our control, and particularly in relation to the work that we're doing around place and also in relation to transport. And as a result of that, our new focus is really on the consequences of us underperforming in those areas that are under our control, rather than the broader regional outcomes, which are not necessarily things that we can do a huge amount about in relation to our resources and responsibilities. In terms of the actions, you've got a series of actions in the appendices to the paper, which set out some of the ways that we are tackling the climate and nature emergency across a whole range of our programmes. In the immediate term, at March committee, there will be some papers which talk in a bit more detail about the programmes and the projects that we'll be delivering over the course of the next financial year across the organisation. Subsequent to that, there will be further work done as part of our longer term investment planning process, which will set out a longer term climate and environment investment plan. And that's our ambition for the next 5 years. So we'll be able to demonstrate how we're taking forward the responsibilities within those areas of under our control. The other thing I just wanted to say is that there is more work for us to do, and we are in the process of starting this, to demonstrate the cumulative impact of our work across all of our programmes. So we want to make sure that we have a way of demonstrating that this isn't just individual things being done in individual projects, but actually there's a way of us monitoring across the piece to demonstrate what the exact impact is of those projects and programs and the mainstreaming that we're doing across our activities. Finally, just to give you a sort of, you will have read the paper, but just a sort of sense of some of those mitigations and controls that we have in place to make sure that we are delivering in the way that we've set, or delivering our requirements and addressing the risk in the way that we've now set it out in this paper. We have a new Environment Advisory Board, which is one of the set of advisory boards that has been established in the course of the last 6 months or so. The growth strategy and the spatial development strategy both have climate and nature emergency at the heart of them, and we'll be monitoring the delivery of that through a series of organisational key performance indicators. And it's important to remember that we do also have a local nature recovery strategy, and we'll be publishing later this year the West of England State of Nature report. So there will be a whole raft of programmes where we do demonstrate collectively how we are taking forward our responsibilities in relation to the climate and ecological emergency. So I'll just pause there. Hopefully that's a sort of helpful summary of why we've moved and what we're moving towards. And Emma and I would be really happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Blenkinsop had his hand up first, and I've noted Councillor Leach.
Thank you. And thank you for this and the report. It's, on the one hand, I understand the logic behind this, and it's good to have clarity. It's also extremely good to hear the notes around the advisory board, and the investment plan process that's planned is obviously really good things. I am a little bit concerned. I sort of understand the logic around I think the phrasing was dilution. It is not a dilution of ambition, but I think I am concerned that one of the things that I was originally concerned around this corporate risk was the sheer complexity of it, the number of moving parts, and how much of that was external, how that was being tracked and managed. And from that point of view, I think we have kind of drawn back a bit, and that concerns me. Most of the new proposals in terms of how we're managing the risk and the mitigations in place look very good. I did have one consideration on the HR implications, point 36. These considerations can be managed within existing HR and OD arrangements and do not require structural change, but they should inform leadership development, objective setting, and capability planning as the revised risk is actively managed. And I'm not sure that it sets out how that will be communicated to the relevant HR and OD considerations in the mitigations in Appendix 2. So if some clarity could be given on that, it would be much appreciated.
Should we answer that one or take questions generally?
Do you want to answer that one? Yeah, please.
Yeah. So the question about dilution of ambition, I mean, the West of England's growth strategy, I think, is really clear on how important the climate and nature emergency is and remains in the delivery of all of our programmes. And this is really what we're trying to do at the moment, is to make sure that rather than this just sitting in one place in the organisation, it's a key issue, and we're addressing it in everything that we do across all of our priority areas. I think you are right, though, and it's why in one area, which is why I mentioned it, which is I think there is more work for us to do to demonstrate the cumulative impact of all of the things that we're doing across all of our programs. We do need to have a means of saying, okay, what does all this add up to? And how do we know whether we've succeeded or not? And that's a piece of work that we're actively looking at the moment to decide what's the best way of doing that. So, I think that is something that we're taking seriously, that we want to be able to demonstrate how that all comes together and the cumulative impact that it has. So we'll certainly want to do that. In terms of the structural change, obviously we're going through the organisation improvement plan, and we're working through that at the moment. So that's really the process through which we will sort of make sure that we've got the resources that we need to deliver this. And the climate and nature team currently now sit within place, and that I think puts a lot of that work at the heart of what we're trying to do. As an example, we're working far more climely on the delivery of the spatial development strategy, which is ultimately the 30-year plan for the spatial plan for the region, and putting climate and nature and climate resilience at the heart of that.
Certainly.
So just on that, so climate and nature team will be advising HR or indeed any other team. They're just that, they will be liaising, let's say, with the teams in question to make sure that's being included in practice.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying, and thank you for that answer. Very reassuring.
Councillor Leach.
Thank you. Appendix 2 mentions the Environment Advisory Board and the Climate Advisory Board. To what extent are these separate advisory boards? And surely they must have some overlapping remit.
So the advisory board itself covers all aspects of the environment. So it looks at, we had the first one a couple of weeks ago, so it looks at climate, nature, and net zero, and the green growth. So that covers the whole thing. I think without finding the wording, I think the other thing refers to an expert panel that we've got, which is a slightly different, not a political expert panel, which supports us in the wider sort of academic field and other aspects of our work. So the Environment Advisory Board is the political board, which is chaired by one of the committee members.
Right, and it covers climate and environment at that advisory level.
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, I have a question. The wording, sorry, the concept of flood defence isn't really mentioned in this risk. I'd like to understand what mitigations are actually in place to deliver flood defences, particularly in the areas of economic growth, the places like Temple Quarter, the low-lying parts of Bristol, Avonmouth, and soon to be hopefully part of the combined authority in North Somerset, which have areas that would be affected radically by sea level change. So it's not on the specified as a mitigation within the actual risk. So I'd like to understand where it's actually being coped in, please.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point, actually. And maybe that's something for us to take away and reflect on. We are doing work in relation to that, so we probably do need to reflect it more effectively. So that would sit within our climate resilience function. We are one of the partners with other agencies, including Bristol City Council, in the I think it's now called the Avon Riverside 2100 strategy. So we sit on the board with the other partners in relation to that, which obviously is one of the key mitigations. So thank you. Perhaps we need to just reflect that more strongly in the actual mitigations themselves.
Thank you. Any more questions? No? Okay, so we have recommendations on page 98 that the Audit Committee note the revised wording, scope and ownership and impacts of the corporate risk CR8 and consider whether the updated mitigations, controls and residual risk assessments set out in appendices 2, 3 and 4 provide an appropriate level of assurance. Do we want to, is that a noting or is that a voting thing, Tim, please? Okay, so I'd like to, can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Shabawala. And a seconder? Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Addison, thank you again. And I'd like to see if anybody would like to vote against this endorsement, please. Anyone want to abstain? Councillor Bleckensop would like to abstain, please. And who would like to vote for this, please? Thank you very much. Everybody else voting for. We'll probably have a comfort break after the next item, I think, because we've gained some time by having a very short public forum. So let's go on to the internal audit plan on item 9, please. This report outlines the annual audit and assurance plan 26 to 27, which forms the principal work of the internal audit service for the new financial year. The audit committee is asked to endorse the plan as per Index 1. Alec Austin and Pete Cann, our internal auditors, will be presenting this.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So the recommendation is that the audit committee approves the audit and assurance plan for the 26-27 financial year. And the report outlines the annual audit and assurance plan, and this forms the main work of the internal audit service for the new financial year. So section 5 of the report, that then gives an overview of the process that we use to formulate the plan and our use of something called the reasonable assurance model to achieve this. An outline of that model is shown in item 6 on page 117 of your pack. And the committee will be familiar with the steps in the consultation that takes place in this process by now. This is the same model that we've used over the previous years to formulate the combined authorities internal audit plan. You'll also see that whilst the plan has been initially produced to cover a full 12-month period, this being 1st of April 26 through to 31st of March 27, we will keep it under continual review and adjust it if necessary to cover any unforeseen requirements. In this respect, we have agreed a contingency of resources to be retained for any urgent or important unforeseen matters arising in year. They might be directed to us through the Section 73 officer, through the Chief Executive, or through yourselves as the Audit Committee. Our usual practice is that we will then report and agree any key changes to the plan with you around the 6-month period. So Section 11 of the report outlines the work that we'll also complete in addition to that shown in the plan. So this includes providing support and guidance to senior management on the combined authorities governance framework, giving advice on any proposed changes to key financial controls, policies and procedures, providing any support that is required in respect of any investigations relating to financial irregularities, and also our continued quarterly attendance at the Organisational Improvement Programme Board. So if I can now draw your attention, please, to Appendix A of the report, which gives more detail on the actual audit plan. And page 126 of that report lists the proposed programme of work for 26-27. So the committee will find that the plan includes areas that we've previously been raised in audit committee meetings, and will note in particular that it includes increased coverage of ICT and cybersecurity, which presents itself as a significant and ongoing risk to organisations, including the combined authority. Furthermore, you should be able to trace back audits to the items in the Council Risk Register, which were presented earlier. So examples of that includes work on CRSTS and Bristol's Temple Quarter, and as I previously mentioned, also on cybersecurity risk management as well. So I wasn't really going to say anything further at this stage, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments on the plan.
Thank you, Pete. Any questions for internal audit? Councillor Addison.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry if this is possibly a bit too specific for this meeting, but I notice you have a cybersecurity review scheduled for Q1. Given the current flurry of interest in AI, would you be planning to cover the risk of uncontrolled use of external AI subsystems by staff as a potential for leaking confidential information? And what controls would you be looking for on AI systems?
So that is a potential area of coverage. My understanding would be that there's probably locked down to which particular AI system which can be used within the combined authority. So I know with the other local authorities that we work for, they are their employees are not allowed to use any others than that are recommended. So, for example, North Somerset Council would be an example where they would only use co-pilots. That's similar at Baines as well. So it shouldn't be that staff are able to use outside of that, but that's one of the things we will look for in the review, is to provide assurance that that is the case at the combined authority as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else with a question? Christine? Yeah. Christine, Jennifer, sorry.
Just in looking at the plan for this year, there's a strong sort of IT focus to it. I was wondering, in light of the previous discussion on CRR8, when that level of corporate risk would start to be included in the internal audit plan?
Yep, so the focus on IT in particular is because although the authority have given it their own particular risk rating, and obviously we've had a session on that earlier on, we still feel that from internal audit that it presents high risk. So if you look at internal audit plans across the country, you will see that cybersecurity is number one on most people's risk management and risk register. So whilst we appreciate and accept what's been said in terms of the combined authorities approach to that, we still think that it will be important to give some internal audit assurance around that. That's something which has been agreed with the Section 73 officer and with the senior management team as well. So they agree that that would be useful use of resources.
Yeah, and I appreciate the strong focus on IT. What I was wondering was about CRR8, so the environment risk, when that would start to flow through in terms of the internal audit planning.
Yeah, so in terms of specific audit, we haven't got any specific one on CRR8, as you will see, but what we will be is we're including that within audits for areas such as CRSTS and also for Bristol Timber Quarter. There'll be two examples of where we would consider the environmental factors within that, and any work that might need to be completed within that regard. Obviously, there was a paper earlier on, wasn't there, about those about the climate items, and they were two in particular which linked into that. Also, again, we work with other local authorities as well. So I know another one that we have looked at within this current year is around the Bath Fashion Museum. That's specific to Bath and North East Somerset Council, but we consider environmental within that audit review as well. Thank you.
Any more questions? I have one. On page 126, there's a table of the work plan. Despite the city region sustainable transport settlement being line item 2, it doesn't happen till Q4. I'm interested in trying to understand why it's in Q4, because all the spending that we're going to be doing for CRSTS is going to be front loaded into the first 6 months of next year. So it'd be really good to make sure that we are spending appropriately and delivering appropriately as soon as possible, and doing it in Q4 means that we're closing the gate after the horse is bolted, for want of a better phrase. So can I have some understanding about why that's in Q4, please?
You certainly can, Chair. A very fair question. We're actually completing an audit on CRSTS at the moment, which is within the current audit plan as well. So this is going to be a supplementary piece of work aimed in Q4 for next year, when obviously the plan will have progressed a lot differently by that perspective. So right at this moment, we are actually doing an audit on CRSTS.
And when will that be coming to committee, or how will that form, please?
We're aiming to complete it by the end of the month, so that will then come to the next committee meeting. That will be our plan.
Excellent. I'm glad that CRSTS is getting an appropriate focus. Any more questions for internal audit? No. So we're asked to endorse the 26-27 plan, and that requires a vote if we're endorsing, doesn't it, Tim? Yeah. So can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Leach, and a seconder, Councillor Simon. Thank you very much. So can I have anybody who's prepared to vote against endorsing this, please? Anybody wanting to abstain? And anybody who wants to endorse it, please? Unanimous. Thank you very much. And we're also asked to note the intention to keep the plan under regular review, including a 6-month progress assessment in order to prioritise the resources as required. I think that's very sensible. Thank you. It's 11 o'clock. Do people want to take a comfort break or do you want to plough on? Okay, let's plough on. Item 10, the Grant Thornton Audit Progress Report and Sector Updates, External Audit. To receive Grant Thornton's Audit Progress Report from Peter Barber and Sophie Morgan-Bauer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. So that, as you say, this is our progress report and sector update, updating members on the position with regard to both the 4.5 and 5.6 audit. I'm joined today by Sophie, who will take you through the detail, including the current position in respect of 25-26. But before I do, just like to give members of the committee a brief update in relation to the outstanding work for 24-25. So just to remind members, our responsibilities are twofold: the opinion on the financial statements and the value for money conclusion. We concluded our opinion work back in December and brought the final findings report to an earlier meeting of this committee and signed off the accounts as a true and fair position for the year in early December. The VFM work for 4.5 was prioritised, and we brought an interim auditor's annual report summarising the findings of that work to the September meeting of this committee. You will remember at that juncture I did communicate to members that we weren't able to conclude our VFM work until we'd considered an objection received from a member of the public, and we'd also received 3 further communications that we treated as matters brought to our attention. And the other issue that was preventing us from concluding the audit was the whole government accounts and the work that may be required by exception from the National Audit Office. So that work is still in train. We are making progress, but it is taking time. In the respect of the objection that requires the most work, that is currently with public sector audit appointments. Any objection that we receive, we have to consider and consider our response. And once we have a proposed response, we have to share that with public sector audit appointments. It is with them, and we await their comments. As soon as I get that, I can then make a judgment on how to proceed. I said we also received 3 matters brought to our attention. I've concluded one of those and I'm not minded to make any changes to our VFM report on the back of that. The other 2 are well progressed, but they're not quite there yet. And clearly what I will seek to do is, at the earliest opportunity, update members further once those remaining areas are outstanding. Once I've done that, and once we've had confirmation from the NEO with regard to whole government accounts, I will then be in a position to issue the certificate for 4.5, closing the audit. So that is a summary of 4.5. Chair, I think yeah, you can.
Can I just come in on that? And can I confirm that all the objections are below the materiality thresholds, don't actually affect the delivery of the accounts?
So in signing my opinion on the 8th of December, I made that judgment that the issues brought to my attention individually and cumulatively do not impact on my opinion. The accounts present a true and fair view.
Thank you.
Chair, do you want to see if there's any other questions on 4.5 before I hand over to Sophie for 5.6? Or
that sounds a very sensible thing to do. Thank you. Any questions? It appears not.
Very much, Chair. Thank you, Pete. So just to provide you with a brief update on the 25-26 financial statements audit. So our work on the interim audit began on the 9th of February this year. Our work is well progressed on that interim and planning stage of the audit. And the key deliverable from that work is the audit plan. We should be in a position to issue that to you very soon, which is good news. We expect to have that with you by the end of the month, and that will then come to the next audit committee. And as part of that plan, we set out our significant risks, and those significant risks are defined in the ISAs as those that require special audit consideration. So in other words, those could have a material impact on the outturn position of the combined authority. Then the following deliverable from that is the outcome of the final audit, which is the audit findings report, and that will be later in the year.
Our value for money work for 2025-26 has also begun at this stage. That began on the 18th of February 2026. And as Pete has mentioned in relation to 24-25, the outcome for that is the auditor's annual report, which will be with you again towards the end of the year. I touch on that on our audit deliverables table, where you can see our audit deliverables that we've planned for 25-26. At that stage, that is the update that we were able to give you at this point until the audit plan comes out, which is far more detailed. The rest of the progress update is more around a sector update, which may be of interest to members. I'll just touch on a couple of these, which are particularly relevant. So the first one that I just want to touch on is the report that we've recently produced, which is the After the Backstop report. So while this doesn't affect the combined authority in that your audit opinion was not backstopped, it was delivered, as Pete said, in December, this is a really interesting report about the wider sector, the wider local government sector, in respect of the backlog of unissued audit opinions, which peaked on 30th of September 2023 at 918. So I would encourage members to read that report. It is, as I said, very interesting report. The other item that I just wanted to bring to your attention was at the end of the report, which is the annual local government accounts webinar, which we hold annually for your finance team to attend. And your Section 73 officer and your finance team did attend our webinar this year. Where we covered practical considerations of working effectively with your auditors. And that is important to note as the timescales are shortening with the backstop date becoming earlier and earlier over the next few years. And it also covered a number of common accounting and disclosure issues and a number of pitfalls where finance teams often have some difficulty around the audit period. So hopefully that will have been useful to your finance team as we provide that every year. And then just at the very last page of our report, there are a number of resources available to the audit committee, which again, we'd encourage your committee members to take a look at as those are particularly relevant. And happy to take any questions on 25-26. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sophie. Any questions, please?
Yes, Chair.
Certainly, Councillor Tibishale.
Yeah, that's the one. This is probably more for finance. In terms of the ongoing delays, do we expect that this could increase the audit's kind of fees?
Completely depends on the outcome. I'm in the same position as you. I'm waiting to hear. I'm waiting to hear. So it completely depends.
So how is this kind of mitigated in terms of, maybe fees escalating or fees not? How's it controlled if the timeline is not something we are aware of?
Through you, Chair, if I may. So in terms of the fees will be set out in the audit plan. They will be based on the fees set by public sector audit appointments. And we will communicate that within the plan. And those fees assume that the authority is able to produce complete, accurate and timely accounts and fully support the audit process. If that is not the case and that doesn't happen, then there is an increased risk of additional fees and delays in discharging our role. I would reflect on the fact that we have historically had good working relationships here with the combined authority. The signing of the accounts last year in December was earlier than many, and there's been a real rush of sign-offs over the last couple of months, given that the backstop deadline was last Friday. So we will continue to work with the authority to ensure that we work together efficiently, so there isn't a need for additional fees and those deadlines are met. And to that aim, Sophie mentioned the webinar that we did nationally, but we also did meet with the Section 73 officer and finance colleagues last week and spent some time actually in this room going through the learning from the prior year, the good points and what worked well and what we need to replicate, but also the areas for further attention to make sure we continue to deliver to that timely deadline. And I would be absolutely looking to bring forward that sign-off date from December to an earlier date this year, and let's see what's possible.
Thank you for that clarification. Sorry, Chair. I just a supplementary there. So how does this affect the combined authority in terms of value for money?
So in terms of the fee?
No, not the fee. In terms of the delay and the unknowns, how does this affect that value for money?
So there are the backstop that this area is looking at is an attempt within the sector to regain timely reporting by auditors, because there are a large number of local government bodies out there that have not been subject to a full audit for many years. The important thing is that that is not the case at the combined authority. You've had clean opinions for a considerable period of time. But clearly there is a concern out there that there isn't that assurance and transparency nationally. So there isn't a direct impact on the combined authority per se. It is more to do with that sector-wide reputational damage and lack of assurance by stakeholders and accountability, given that non-delivery in the past. I'm not sure if that helps.
Yes, it does. And it leads me just on my final question. I think you mentioned there's an accountability bill. I'd like to understand where the combined authority is in implementing some of those potential recommendations from there, although it's still in development. But what do you foresee are the key things to mitigate?
Through you, Chair. So yes, this is absolutely one of the wider sector developments that we've brought to your attention. And as part of that, we do include some challenge questions for audit committee members to consider. So you can prepare for the change by asking yourselves, when was your code of ethics last updated? Are your policies and your procedures consistent with those expected changes to the guidance? Are you sufficiently candid and transparent? When did you last consider the effectiveness of the committee? And are your disciplinary arrangements working well? So certainly there are some challenge questions there to consider as part of that bill. As I said, this is more of a sector development. This isn't something that specifically sits within the financial statements audit approach, but it's more to just make sure that members are aware of it. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess it's because of the legal and criminal enforceability of the bill that it provides some reassurance, but therefore it does need to be, and it's a statutory bill. So I'm interested in understanding from your perspective of finance, what are the steps that's been taken to get ready and prepare for this, if necessary?
Yeah, and I mean, that would be something for the combined authorities to consider where it is on that journey to ensuring that when this is eventually passed, that you are in a position to be able to demonstrate transparently that you are addressing and applying this guidance.
Any more questions for Grant Thornton? No, thank you very much. So the recommendation is that we note and provide comment on the attached report, which I think we've done. So thank you very much, Grant Thornton. Move on to item 11, which is the Value for Money Report Improvement Recommendation Update. This report provides an update to the agreed actions to strengthen procurement and contingent labour governance, including IR35 compliance, reporting and contractual controls. Elliot Williams, the Head of Commercial, and Kay Howick, Head of HR, will be introducing this one.
Oh yeah, he's on his way, sorry. Hi, I'm Kay Howick, Head of HR and OD. Nice to see you all. Right. So just to introduce the report, so this report responds to the Grant Thornton Value for Money report that was presented to committee in September 25. It focuses on the 7 actions to improve our processes on contingent worker arrangements that arose from the report. This report has been completed jointly between colleagues in HR, so my team, and in commercial, so Elliot's team, to ensure there's alignment and joint compliance. So just to summarise, the report provides an update to the agreed actions to strengthen procurement and contingent labour workforce, including IR35 compliance, reporting and contractual controls. I'll leave it there in case anyone's got any questions on the report rather than go through it in heaps of detail.
I think that would be good if you could, please. Yeah.
I think everyone's had a copy of the report. I can read out a summary from each section. Elliot and I can take it in turns, or okay. Do you want to go through with the first one? Is that sure?
Yeah, sorry. Morning, everyone. Yeah, very quickly then, the commercial actions. So I think the first one is to implement a quarterly commercial and procurement compliance report. So we're probably in the cycle of our 4th report, goes tomorrow actually to CLT. So that's underway. We're trending above 90% in terms of compliance for our procurements, both against procurement regs and policy. Do you want me to just rattle through the commercial ones? Does it make sense to? Yeah. So that's the first action on the commercial team. Second was to review and enhance service agreements and templates and make some checks in there. So for example, new additions, things like the ethical rules agreement, we've implemented separately for contractors or consultants that come into the business that may be compromised to an extent. Confidentiality agreements, stuff like that, confidentiality clauses we've just checked. So that was the secondary action, and that's complete. We amended our procurement request form, which is an approval form that we use internally within the business when we go through procurement process, to incorporate an IR35 compliance check with the HR team. So Kay's team will have visibility of that procurement request form. They review the requirement and their sense check whether there's an implication for IR35 or not. And then the final one, I think the next one is, it's a joint report, isn't it, for myself in terms of commercial governance training. So we've rolled out a series of training events across the business, joint with HR and actually other members of our directorate, finance and grants. So it's a joint session, and I don't know how many we've done. I think we're about 4 in, and we've got another one lined up next month or April and so on. So they're kind of like every 2 months or so.
I think there's probably only 2 outstanding that sit with me. One of those is the IR35 assessment, which Elliot has just touched on. So that sits with my team in terms of making sure those checks are done and saved on file for every contingent worker that comes in. And then the other one is the regular contingent labour reporting to CLT. So we've improved that dashboard, ensured it pulls in commercial and financial data as well. So we've got a single source of truth, which will go quarterly to CLT. And then longer term, we will build that into more sort of strategic HR dashboard that we're working on separately to this process. I think that's probably covered all 7. Yep.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, please, Councillor Tibbs-Sala.
Thanks. So thank you. And on that point of single point of truth, I wonder if there's been any retrospective analysis being done on the RI35 and HR controls, just to see what's happened with past contractors and existing contractors, and some of those that have been long-standing.
We've really only gone through those that are kind of still on our books, and recently it would be a huge task, I think, to go back too far, but that's something we can go and bring back if that would be helpful.
I'll leave that up to the chair.
Okay.
But in terms of what Peter touched on in regards to the objection, how have you made ringway for any changes or suggestions that may be put to mandate some changes on procurement?
What procurement would be maybe with Elliot?
In terms of mandates and changes to procurement. So, I mean, the biggest
coming from the audit objections, public objections.
It's on the statement of accounts, yeah.
Yeah, but we don't know what.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just in terms of flexibility, because there's the unknown unknowns, and what those changes may be, just to understand from your team how flexible you are to manage unforeseen changes within procurement that may come from audit.
Well, in terms of agility, in terms of the procurement team, just generally, we can be relatively agile in terms of our scope and our requirements. In terms of the challenges that will come from audit, to Solange's point, it's a little bit, until we have the feedback, it's difficult to react and respond to that question. But yeah, we're a close-knit business that collaborates closely with our directorate, so we have the ability to be agile when required. But specifically, I think it's a challenge to answer that question right now without the visibility of what it is.
Yeah. Chair, if I may, in terms of the retrospective, I think looking at it from a 2024 up to now would be a useful period of time. I don't know about the capacity, but I think it would kind of ensure that where we are with the delays of audit and the retrospective, it's actually looking at future-proofing everything from there, not necessarily everything from before there. That could be a different kettle of fish. But up to your thoughts.
I think that retrospective look would be useful, I think, for this committee to understand what the scope of the actual issue was.
Of course, we can take that away and bring something back in due course.
Councillor Williams had his hand up first, and Councillor Simon.
On the retrospective issue, you said it would be a big undertaking to go back to look at all former contractors, but has the former contractor who worked for the former mayor, has that particular situation been checked in detail to make sure that all tax considerations have been properly undertaken by the authority?
Yes, so all the processes would be put in place for those. We've done some looking into that.
You've done some looking into that, into the former contractor who worked for the former mayor, and I think we all know who we're talking about. And what were the findings of that looking back?
I mean, I don't have that to hand. This report was to kind of look at the processes and the steps we've made. I think if there's a request for that, we'd have to bring it back, if that's fair, to another meeting.
Nothing springs immediately to mind?
I
think Kay's answered the question. This report is very specific in terms of what it's about.
Councillor Simon.
On this retrospective question, I mean, in HMRC can go back several years. So I think what's needed is a risk assessment of the need to be able to be sure that we are proof against a retrospective look by HMRC. And I think officers perhaps need to have a think about that. My question, though, was going to be, this is a useful response to the audit report, and I think it shows teams working together effectively in that sort of way. But the other thing that does worry political leaders, I think, about contingent labour is the extra cost that incurs over employment. And are the reporting controls about the cost of contingent labour to the appropriate mechanism?
Yeah, they are, and I would say probably part of the future work we're looking at around our target operating model would factor that in terms of how and when we reduce that resource.
So to address the retrospective question that Councillor Tibishala has proposed, I think it would be useful to get the particular data about that particular instance of the use of IR35, because IR35 is both simple and complex at the same time. Since its introduction, it has caused lots of complexities for contractors within not just the local government environment, but also IT. So yes, I would agree with that. That would be useful to have. One question around scope of how IR35 is actually working at the moment. Do we know how many contractors that the West of England Combined Authority does employ currently that come under IR35, please?
I haven't got that data to hand. I'm afraid I didn't bring that for today. Again, we can build that into the next report. I don't believe there's many, but I wouldn't like to state a number.
I think if we could have a table for like the past 3 or 4 years, yeah, that would be really useful, please. Councillor Tibishala.
Thanks. You just made me think about something else there. In terms of non-compliant, what's the specific consequence or remediate action that kind of triggers always flagged? What do you do when you find non-compliant procurement?
So, as Bess mentioned, the compliance report actually demonstrates a high level of compliance within the business. We does that based on our policy. So we have 3 levels. So you're like sub 25, 25 to 207, 207 and above. And we just track those through various forms, including our commercial governance, and we track the approval levels. When there's something outside of policy, we immediately take corrective actions. For example, it might be the fact that the paperwork's missing in terms of the approval to support a PO and stuff like that. So we kind of action that straight away. In terms of non-compliance, in terms of procurement acts type stuff, we haven't registered any of those in the time we've been running the report.
I think just as well as you've mentioned, with those that are in good stead, it would be good to see what are the actions taken for non-compliant procurement.
Yeah,
either
sure.
As a legal action or non-legal action. And I think it'd just be good just to kind of really provide some risk management of non-compliant.
Yeah, I'm picking this up as an action, so
Yeah.
I can come back with some of the measures we put in place to address those actions.
Yes, because I think we're going to talk on social value at some point, and that is also, yeah, exactly. So there's also potential non-compliant onto that. So I think non-compliant needs to be quite a something that you can bring back. Is that right, Chair?
I agree. Yes, Councillor Simon.
Do we have contracts or frameworks in place to engage contingent labour, or is it done ad hoc, case by case?
No, we have contracts in place that address and support professional service providers, primarily at strategic level and at delivery level. Depending on the level of engagement, impacts the determination of whether we're saying it's a service or a person that comes into the business.
Thank you. So I think we've got some actions there about bringing a further report back to committee. Can that report actually define what IR35 is? Because I think there's a lot of confusion about how it's actually formed and how it's actually applied in terms of the MCA, because people are being employed to do contract work when that employee could be a permanent employee, which is where the muddiness about IR35 comes from. So it'd be good to have a definition, a shared understanding of how the MCA is actually employing people, please.
Yeah, happy to bring that back.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
And it'd also be helpful, I think, if that table said which part of the combined authority contractors are working and some values against the values of those contracts, and if possible, what an employee, a directly employed person, would cost instead of engaging a contractor, and be prepared for some narrative in questions as to why we can't recruit people directly into those posts and have to get a contractor.
I agree. Yeah. Thank you. Jennifer Whitten. Sorry.
I had a question on the quarterly commercial compliance reporting. So it says in the action update that it covers all procurements undertaken, and I was curious how you identify all procurements. What's the scope of all there, and what work is being done to identify any procurements that might have been done outside of the the normal process?
Are you okay to go? Is your mic on?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I might not have been speaking into it. So my question was on the quarterly commercial and procurement compliance reporting. So the action says that it covers all procurements undertaken, and I was curious to understand how you define all procurements and what efforts are being taken to ensure that any procurement activity is identified.
Yeah, okay. So it's all procurements that come through our procurement team and that we consult and work with. So effectively, it should be all procurements across the business. Now, I wouldn't say there are outliers to that, but you only have visibility of what you have visibility of and what comes through. But anything under our recent, we came to the committee probably last time, and we adjusted our thresholds. So anything above a £29,000 threshold is self-delivered. So that is delivered by the business. So that we have limited visibility. Anything above that is delivered by a commercial business partner. So anything above the 30k, I'm confident we have full visibility of. Anything above 207k comes through commercial board and we get full visibility of. 30k we lean in quite a lot and support because the business requires it. But yeah, so I've got high levels of confidence that they channel through our team. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
This is a follow on there. Is it possible to procure anything above the threshold without engaging with the team?
Is it possible? Not really in the business, in terms of if you're following commercial governance in the business and just general governance across the business, then that should align, and all above procurement thresholds should come through the commercial team. And if it isn't caught by us, then it would likely be caught by finance, as we have head of service approvals, and also our legal counterparts who also help with terms and conditions. So there's three hurdles, if you like, to get through before we went out and published it publicly. So I would suggest not.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Jennifer.
Yeah, just touching on that, and maybe just a point of clarification. When looking at transport schemes, some of them have a huge scope creep, and budgets may change, but you still got the same contractor. Yeah, we started with one project, but it's changed over time. But then, does that go through re-procurement?
Yes, that comes through as a contract verification or modification.
So that contract will be re-procured. Or it'd be
not re-procured. Under procurement regs, you can adjust a contract up to the value of 50% of the original contract value.
Okay.
So providing it meets the criteria specified procurement regs, it would come through the cycle of governance, and then depending on where that sits within the procurement regs, it gets approval.
Okay.
Yeah, or non-approval if it breaks it. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions or clarifications? No. Okay, I would like to move on to the recommendations on page 149, that Audit Committee to review the progress made against the value for money report and recommendation, the value for money report recommendation in relation to the appointment of contractors. So we've made some recommendations and we'd like to see some more detail. If that could come back to the next Audit Committee, that'd be brilliant. Thank you very much. 11:30, anybody need a break? No? Okay, I'd like to move on to item 12 then, the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlements Programme update on rebaselining. To provide the West of England Combined Authority Audit Committee with an update on the outcome of the City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlements Programme rebaseline exercise. And Chris Salmon will be introducing that, please. And Emma Blackman.
Hi, in a slight change to the order, I'm going to just do a quick intro on that if I can, Chair. So the paper is here today to provide you with an update on the CRSTS programme. As I'm sure we're all aware, but just by way of background, the CRSTS programme was originally and deliberately over-programmed back in 2024 and had that very specific funding end date of construction completion by March 27. As reported to the committee in October last year, there's new guidance that came out from DfT around the transition from the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement Programme to the Transport for City Regions Programme, effectively modified that end date from a construction completion date of March 27 to contractually committed by that point, which in effect had a helpful effect on the programme in terms of releasing and reducing that risk of spending the money by March 27. So at the October committee, it was agreed to allocate 140 million of the TCR funding to complete that CRSTS programme. It was noted that the DFT guidance had changed at that point, and for us, and delegated authority to officers to take the decision to rebaseline that programme and send that in through a change request into the Department for Transport. That has now happened, and the DFT change request has been submitted. We're expecting the DFT board to consider that later this month. The appendices to the report then goes on to set out the new rebaseline programme and highlights the changes there, which I'm not going to go through, but I suspect you may have questions on, so we'll happily take those. To the point that was raised earlier on the CRR, I think it's important to recognise that the risk reviews are done at a point in time. If you look at the detail of the mitigations and the planned mitigation in that under the CRSTS risk itself, the submission of the DFT change request is one of the planned mitigations. So I'm here today telling you that we have actioned that and we're awaiting the feedback from it. So when you see the corporate risk review next time, I would anticipate that, you know, not prejudging how that conversation with the Department for Transport might go, I would expect to see the ratings of that scoring change as we've implemented that mitigation, if that makes sense. So it's more of a point in time than that won't have made a big difference to the risk on the programme. Happy to take any questions.
Anybody want to make any questions? Oh, Emily.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask about one of the changes. So the micro-mobility parking, which I actually had to look up the phrase, but that is just the parking of e-scooters and e-bikes, which residents in my ward complain about all the time. But my understanding of where we are in that process at the moment is we are basically just working out locations for those. So my question is just how confident are you that we'll be able to meet the demand based on this reduction in funding?
Yeah, thank you. Certainly, as you say, setting out working with the highways authorities to work out right locations, and certainly working with the provider as well, looking at the demand, where the demand is. That funding is obviously in there at the moment for £1 million. Once the designs and locations have been confirmed, we can then identify whether that's sufficient or not, whether there needs to be, be aware of what may need to change in the future. What we are confident of is that will significantly increase the parking capacity, and certainly a combination of that with some other measures. So, for instance, some of the work being done around parking non-compliance, since those changes were made last summer, we're now seeing 99% parking compliance across the region, which is drastically improving.
Councillor Williams.
Following on from Emily's question, unless I've missed something, isn't this still a never-ending trial?
It's still a trial, yes.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The government haven't yet brought forward legislation. We're waiting to hear if and when they do. So it's still in trial.
So while I'm not opposed to it, because I think, as Emily said, lots of residents are unhappy with scooters and bikes being parked all over the place and not in designated bays, we are effectively making permanent something that legally is still a trial. Does that expose us to any comeback?
To date, the parking we've put in place has often been online and digitally kind of done, so they can specify where in a zone through based on the system, rather than creating formal fixed infrastructure. Going forward, there will be options to do fixed infrastructure, but currently it's all being done with just lines and bays and on the system. So then it allows flexibility.
I understand that, but I mean, I've seen some of them appear, and they are an improvement. It's interesting that the combined authority can get white lines painted. Is it the combined authority that's actually contractually doing this, or is it member authorities?
I think it's the unitary authorities doing the white line painting.
Yes.
Right. Well, it's interesting that this can be done, but lots of other things like repainting zebra crossings seems to be quite a problem, certainly in Bristol. But another question that on another former Mayor Rees, I think, resisted doing this when we could have done it in the past in areas where it would lead to not just a loss of parking places, but to loss of parking places for which people paid within either a residence parking zone or the controlled parking zone in the city centre. Is that still a factor? And if it is, what are the financial implications for the underlying authorities that do collect the parking revenue?
I don't have specific detail on that question around financial loss for parking for the local highways authorities. We're working really closely about finding off-street parking, particularly, as well as on-street. And then obviously there is also the concession fee. I don't know if you wanted to add any more on that.
No, I mean, all I would say is that we're, throughout all that we do on micromobility, working really closely with constituent councils. So it isn't us, suggesting that we take out X number of spaces in X locations. We're doing that collaboratively so that the any risks around revenue, etc., would be considered by the highway authority at that point in time. So that's not one for us to decide directly, but clearly if there was an impact on revenues in one of the constituent councils, that would be something for the constituent council to take into account before we decided to implement in that location.
Councillor Rush.
Can I raise the issue of these scooters all over the place on corners with wheelchairs? I personally had to move round the corner, round these 2-3 scooters out the way of a wheelchair about 3 weeks ago, and it really is a problem. People just don't think about it.
I'm not sure that's in scope for this conversation. We're talking about the funding streams as opposed to the actual implementation. Councillor Tupusala.
Thanks. I'd be interested in understanding the equalities impact assessments on some of these schemes alongside is the usage of them. Previously, I used to see quite a lot of usage, and now I'm not necessarily seeing a lot of usage. So is it meeting its actual set objective? I think would be my primary kind of ask really about this infrastructure, not necessarily about cost, but the cost to the public, because it's meant to reducing traffic and it's meant to be ensuring that people are mobilized and so forth. So I guess I'm more interested in that as a comparison of where it was before, where it is now, and the actual usage to better understand if it's actually serving its purpose.
Is that question related to IMS specifically or generally about the programme?
Generally about the programme.
Okay, so generally about the programme, we, through the business case development stage, we look at what we expect the economic impacts to be, how we account for those through the 5-stage business case process. That also then relates on to the monitoring and valuation of the schemes and the need for us to do that and collect that information, which will then feed into how we assess progress through outcomes frameworks. So as you will know, I'm sure with a lot of the work that's happening across the region at the moment, we have got our monitoring and evaluation plans, which will have looked at the before. There is a bit around what the during can tell you through during construction, and then absolutely we'll be looking at how we monitor those schemes in completion to see usage, to see how we can demonstrate the benefits that were anticipated at the beginning of the scheme. Now, we're not really quite there yet because we're only halfway through the programme, and let's be honest, there's still quite a lot of construction to go, but that will be being brought together through that monitoring and evaluation process.
Okay, thank you. My final one is about scope reduction, where there's quite a number of scope reduction in terms of the submission based on budgets. I'm quite interested in understanding, the risk of the equalities impact assessment, because that's not something that we see from the total submissions, how that's actually been used as a risk assessment for schemes that are selected on the basis of publicly accessible, disably accessible, all of that kind of part. Does that make part of the risk assessment of the transport work as a core feature, besides environmental and everything else? I just want to get some reassurance about that the scope reductions aren't reducing the equalities impact.
So in the context of equalities impact assessments, we almost went straight into an acronym, but I stopped myself. Those are done on a project by project basis as we go through and sign off schemes. So there is a step in that process that reassures us through our grant assurance that we are not funding something that would be wildly inappropriate in the context of an EQIA. What we don't necessarily do is say, if there's a scope reduction, would a different scope look better or deliver more in that context? And that's the thing that I think you're questioning, whether we do that assessment. We don't, but what we do absolutely do is make sure that we have the full paperwork to support the schemes that are coming forward.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions about table 16, which is on page 170 of our pack. It does refer to the sorry, David, this might say to you, the removal of Park Street from the allocations. Could you tell us how much money for the combined authority that frees up, and whether any consideration has been given as to where that freed up money could go? So that's the first question.
Sorry, do you want me to wait till you're finished with your
question? Second question is a completely different topic.
In which case I'll answer it now, if that's okay. So at the committee in October, it was agreed that the additional TCR funding would come into complete the CRSTS programme. At that point, it was also agreed that that would be a constituent council by constituent council and mayoral combined authority allocation. So those allocations were put into place, and there was an allocation for each of us, which is covered off in the table. The use, deployment and reallocation of those fundings is being promoted through this rebaselining programme by each of those organisations. So if you like, if the Park Street scheme has come out, it will be reallocated, and it is being proposed in this sense to total the same allocation for the schemes in the table.
Not entirely clear about that answer. So does that mean that the money currently has not been reallocated and sits with the combined authority?
It doesn't sit with the combined authority. What we've said in the paper is that we have a total, so I'm just flicking through the papers now, a total by organisation table in table 1 on page 157. So there's the pre-allocations in there, there's the revised allocations that went to the committee, and then there's the revised allocations for the CRSTS board. So each of those organisations has an envelope of funding which they are reallocating through this process. So if I pick one, South Gloss Council, 162.36 million previously, up to 163.52. It is their proposals that have come forward to allocate that funding in this rebaselining process. So the MCA is not withholding or taking back any of those allocations. The amount per organisation remains the same.
Okay, I get that. What I was trying to get to, Chairman, is we know that part of the background to the Park Street decision was that the Mayor of the West of England had indicated she didn't wish to see MCA money being used to fund that scheme. So Bristol City Council was looking for alternative methods of financing it. This is before it was voted down anyway. So I'm just trying to understand the sort of follow the money, as it were.
Remains within Bristol's allocation for Bristol to bring forward as they have promoted through the rebaselining process.
Right. So Bristol can come up with new schemes for the money that.
So we're not adding new scope into the programme at this stage, because what we know through the papers that came to the October committee is that, and forgive me, I haven't got the numbers quite in my head right now, but in essence, all of the revised full anticipated costs for the programmes were higher than the amount that was previously allocated. So we went through the process in October to consider methods for allocating enhanced funding pots to all of the organisations, which we did in the October committee. That allocated an increased allowance for all of the organisations against the fact that we knew at that point in time that that wouldn't fund the full anticipated costs of all of the programme. The rebaselining exercise has done two things. It's enabled the organisations to go away and have a look at their delivery programmes again, so the delivery programmes are more realistic because of the extra time, but has also enabled us to go away and look at what is the art of the possible within those funding allocations agreed at committee.
Okay, I think I'll move on to my second question. Okay. And it's a very specific one. Wearing two hats here. This is my ward hat as well as a member of this committee. Work Package 5 North View, which is in Westbury Park, has gone from 0 to 400,000. Are you able to say why that's the case?
This is table 16. We can confirm what is specifically separately, but I don't have exact scope to hand on.
I suggest you ask the policy chair about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you.
The committee is asked to note the update on the City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlements Programme. Thank you very much. So, item 13, the National Fraud Initiative Outcome 24-25. The progress to date, findings from risk prioritised review and the planned completion of outstanding potential matches from the National Fraud Initiative exercise. Steve Finnegan to introduce. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. So this report then sets out the outcomes to date for the combined authorities' participation in the 24-25 exercise. It's a national data matching exercise designed to identify potential fraud, duplicate payments, and any control weaknesses we may have. The National Fraud Initiative software does apply a deliberately sensitive algorithm, meaning it generates a high volume of potential matches, and a match is not evidence of fraud. It's a prompt for a review. There were 1,400 potential matches on our list over this 3-year period. We adopted a structured risk-based approach, prioritising the highest value and the highest risk cases to provide early assurance. To date then, 16.2 million of potential duplicate payment transactions have been reviewed, 6.1 million of input VAT has been examined. All identified duplicate creditor standing data cases have been fully reviewed. No duplicate payments, no VAT overclaims or any fraudulent activity, and no control weaknesses have been identified to date. In addition, our review of supplier setup controls, payment authorization processes, and segregation of duties has confirmed that these controls are operating as designed. Quarterly VAT reconciliations and a recent HMRC VAT audit also provide further independent assurance. The remaining cases left to look at are lower value and lower risk and are being progressed to completion by the 31st of March. 3 procurement payroll matches remain under review. At this stage, there is no evidence of inappropriate procurement activity. On the basis of the work we have undertaken to date, provides us the assurance that our creditor, VAT and related financial controls are robust and operating effectively. I welcome any members' questions.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions for Steve, please? No? Thank you very much, Steve, and it's a very useful report. Thank you. Now we move on to item 14, the social value procurement contracts. This paper, we need to recommend, sorry, to move on to recommendations. The Audit Committee will be asked to note the progress of the date in reviewing the 24-25 National Fraud Initiative, potential matches and the planned completion of remaining reviews by the 31st of March 26. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 14, social value and procurement contracts. This paper formalises the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority's approach to social value and procurements and contracts. Elliot Williams will be speaking to this, please.
Oh, morning again. Yeah, so just to quickly introduce this paper, it is, as Councillor Wilcox has said, we came and did an informal briefing actually to the Audit Committee back in November, 10th of November, I believe, on social value. We had quite an extensive session, and this paper today formalises our social value framework off the back of a recently drafted and approved social value policy within the MCA. I'll leave it there, I think, because I think you're familiar with it and open to questions.
Thank you, Elliot. Who would like to open the questioning? Well held back, Councillor Tripajala.
Thank you very much. I think this is a welcome piece of work. We know where the combined authority has been, but I think the future looks much more enthusiastic and positive in terms of how this framing is positioned, which is definitely something that the public, I'm sure, would also welcome. What I wanted to check with you is, for example, we just had the discussion about the environmental piece, where the risk was mitigated down because combined authority rather managed than deliver, and therefore it scored higher. And when we look at the transport schemes, it's equally the same. They're delivered by council, local authorities, not the combined authority. So how do you then manage the reporting of local authorities to your social value framework when they are the ones delivering it and running through their procurement versus your procurement? So I'm trying to understand the accountability between different local authorities and your money and the procurements. So if you can just help me square that up, that'd be great.
I'll try. Yeah, so the context of this report is social value in our procurements that we procure as the West of England, and then our contracts as the West of England.
Okay.
So it's what we put as obligations within the contract with the supplier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is your annual spend then in terms of what you procure? Because I think I as much as I like the qualitative 1 to 4 scoring, I think there's an opportunity to actually be a bit bolder in terms of the priorities that are set to, for child poverty and so forth, to actually put some goals to say 5,000 would be this or whatever as some sort of target, because the 1 to 4 doesn't give me that framing.
Yeah.
So
typical run rate spend is about 100 million, I believe. But I mean, but the funding we get across is considerably greater. They don't necessarily align on an annual basis. But in terms of, sorry, just going back to your question, in terms of, I forgot the second part of your question. Actually, this is just remind me.
Like in terms of being able to quantify it based on your spend, so you can have some reassurance of how much impact you're aiming to have. I can't tell how much impact you want to have from a rating of 1 to 4.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, this is in the context of each and every contract that we put in place. So the social value requirement will be specific to that contract, and the social value theme that comes forward will be in the context of that contract. So it does tie back to your annual global, like your total spend, but it's actually very fragmented in the micro level of each of those contracts. How they're measured, it is put out there as a test within the ITT. Suppliers respond to that, and obviously the winning bidder, their proposal formulates what we measure going forward. Now you're familiar with the historic position because I summarised and gave you a view on that as well. This framework will address it, that we'll put controls in, we'll manage social value better going forward. And actually, I think that aligns quite well with the most recent informal briefing that I did with you guys relating to contract management, because when that model establishes, then that will give us greater ability and headroom to manage social value more appropriately.
Sorry, Chair, through you. Just in terms of, because this is the first phase, really, of putting this, of starting this. I wonder at which point then we'd be able to kind of have a review to see where you are and the learnings that you are finding as you progress through with, you know, this very much appreciated system change.
Yeah.
So what do you think that review process would be like for committee?
Yeah, well, I think subject to going through governance and getting approval today, then you're probably better off revisiting it sort of no earlier than 6 months, for example, because then you'd have to, once we go through this, we'd have to sit down with key stakeholders within the business and do a training and sort of embed the social value framework with them. So there's a period of doing that, and then to get meaningful data back, you probably want to run it for several months. So I'd say no earlier than the 6-month period. Yeah. Yeah, that seems sensible.
So we can
Yeah.
add it to the form.
No problem.
Thank you, Councillor Simon.
Thank you. I'm looking at page 206, which is the scoring on family and home. And I'm a bit worried that some of the higher scores imply that you can buy your way into a higher score by funding charity projects or twisting the arm of your staff to volunteer. It seems to me that what we're really looking at is excellent companies are ones that embed things that will have the long-term effect by the way they do business rather than by buying their way into the system.
The specific area you linked to, I'd have to refresh and refer to it and read through it now, because there's quite a lot in the paper, not in the paper, in the framework itself. I think your broader question about suppliers buying their way in, I think that will be addressed through the procurement and the structuring of the ITT questions around social value, and then the evaluators having the appropriate people who have who are owning the demand requirement of the procurement and therefore have the context of how we're procuring it, will assess those responses. I think without a framework, I recognise your point in terms of people being able to game the system. I think with the framework, I think we reduce that risk quite considerably with those guidelines. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, good point. Yeah, social value is just one measure of the evaluation process. So there's multiple others.
Certainly, yeah.
I think to aid on that reassurance is when looking at local spend. Sometimes local spend could be a higher amount in terms of jobs, buying local and so forth. So that could be quite a high impact, but then it's not necessarily place-based to really know where it's being delivered. So maybe that just needs a bit more refinement about local spend. Where has that local spend been? And that could give you a little bit more granular detail about local spend, because sometimes they say local spend has been 1 million of this contract, but you don't know what that means. Yeah.
So that's a takeaway to just clarify. Yeah. Okay. Understood.
Any more questions? Well, I have a question. So amongst this whole report, there is no even ballpark figure about what the monetary value associated with social value that WECA can actually deliver could have been or will be in the next, in the previous year or the next year. Do we have any actually idea about that, please?
I suppose if I speak openly, there isn't a number that we've kind of socialised or agreed upon in terms of percentage of the valuation of procurements. Is the minimum requirement of 10% to be assessed. That doesn't necessarily translate to value. So I think that would have to be a takeaway to consider that. And and see if it's appropriate to put a target on social value across the business. But yeah, I think that'd be it.
I think it would give people a better appreciation of the value of social value if we had a monetary figure associated with it. We're putting a lot of effort into understanding what social value is, and I think we need to get that value of the return of the investment that WEC is making.
Okay,
I think that'd be useful. So unless we have any more questions, I'd like to move on to the recommendation on page 183. That the Audit Committee notes that the proposed approach to social value in procurement contracts. So we note that. It's 12 o'clock. Does anybody need a comfort break? Ploughing on then? Okay. The Constitutional Review, item 15, Audit Committee Terms of Reference. To seek the Audit Committee's endorsement of the proposed amendment to the Terms of Reference of the Audit Committee. Stephen Hellard will be introducing this item.
Thank you. Shall just bring that a bit closer. Okay. Thank you, members. So you'll be aware of the ongoing review of the Constitution. You received a report on that back in December, which set out the work of the working group, the drivers, the principles, the scope of the review. The working group has now moved on to start reviewing the terms of the Constitution itself in line with those agreed principles and scope. And as part of that work, the existing terms of reference of the Audit Committee have been reviewed. So the working group is proposing a number of amendments to the terms of reference. Those are attached to the report. And the working group consider that they really provide more assurance over governance, finances and risk management of the combined authority, ensure transparency and accountability to the public, and more accurately reflect the functions of the Audit Committee. I've set out in the report a brief table of the main changes. I'm happy to take members through that column by column if that would be helpful. Equally, if you've had the opportunity to read that and would just like to comment, I'm in your hands, members.
So I propose we take questions about the general direction of the terms of reference, and then we go through page by page each of the terms of reference sections. So let's start with questions about the general direction of the terms of reference. Anybody want to raise any questions, please? Councillor Hucker.
Thank you, Chair. Very basic question. If the amended terms of reference are accepted, then when would they be implemented?
Yeah, that's a good question. So any changes to the Constitution have to be approved by the main committee. So the current proposal is that the phase 1 of the constitutional review would go to the annual meeting of the combined authority in June, and the new constitution would be adopted with effect from that meeting, so early June.
Councillor Leach.
Thank you. Would you see the change in the terms of reference as an expansion of the role of the Audit Committee? And if so, would there be any changes to our procedures?
So I think the proposed changes do two things. They add some clarity to your functions at the moment. I think you can see at the moment the terms of reference are about a quarter of a page, which I don't think is really sufficiently sets out the functions of this committee. There are some proposed expansion of functions within the new terms of reference. Particularly, the working group identified that in relation to information governance, there is no committee with authority for that at the moment. So, for example, nobody is auditing our compliance with the Data Protection Act, the Freedom of Information Act, Environmental Information Regulations. So we've proposed that the remit of this committee be expanded to include that, so that you can hold us to account in relation to that. There's also an expansion in relation to standards. So the Combined Authority doesn't have its own standards committee, but there is a requirement for there to be a committee that deals with any complaints that members have breached the code of conduct. So it seems to the working group that that best sits as, within a subcommittee within the audit committee. So I think it's a bit of both. There is certainly some expansion of your role, but equally I think there's a lot of reinforcing and being more open and transparent and clear about your existing functions.
Councillor Hucker and then Councillor Addison.
Thank you, Chair. Do you mind if I make a comment on a specific proposal in the terms of reference? I'm not sure if the Chair would prefer me to hold that till later, but I have to, even though it's sort of the practice in other combined authorities, I have to admit that I'm not convinced by the proposal that the audit committee, the chair of the audit committee, should be an independent person rather than an elected member. If one of the objectives is to improve public accountability, then that to me would seem to have the opposite effect. And I've been on the committee for some time now, and during that period, I think that the elected members that have chaired the committee have done an admirable job. I believe that Councillor Wilcox is a fine chair of this committee, and I think the same applied to Councillor Gollop previously. And so, given my experience of serving on the committee, I'm personally not convinced of the proposal to have an independent person as chair rather than an elected member as chair. I just wanted to make that comment.
Before the answer is given, can I give some context about the devolution bill that's currently going through Parliament? The devolution bill does not at the moment require MCAs to have independent audit chairs. There might be some secondary legislation coming in, but that is not yet defined. So I am slightly also concerned that we are running before we should walk in terms of how the terms of reference should be formed. So I would also raise some concerns about the necessity of an independent chair. Councillor Simon, yeah.
Yes, I'm was going to raise this with Councillor Hucker and Gotting first. I feel very strongly that political accountability is important in this sort of committee. My proposal is that we appoint co-chairs, that we retain a political chair, but we increase the visibility of the independent members by having a co-chair who's an independent member. The chair and the co-chair, the others, two co-chairs can sort out who does what, but certainly to my mind, in reporting to main committee, for instance, I think that's a political role. I mean, obviously, either way, I don't have skin in this particular game, but because the vice, if this is accepted, you don't need a vice chair. But I would like to propose that we recommend to the main committee that this committee should have co-chairs. When we come on to the hearing subcommittee, that should be chaired by an independent. But I'd like to move that as an amendment to these recommendations?
We will get to that when we go through the document, I think.
Okay, park it,
yes,
pro tem.
I won't forget, don't worry. Yeah, please come in. Yes, Steve.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to make it perfectly clear that that proposal is no reflection whatsoever on the current chair or any previous chair of this committee. It's simply considered to be best practice, and as a working group, we didn't think we would be doing our job if we didn't present to you what is considered to be best practice. It's not a case of trying to foresee what will come out of the devolution bill. It was simply that we considered that to be best practice. SIPFA's recommendation is at least 2 independent members on the audit committee. What they say is that there should be a strong, independently minded chair displaying a depth of knowledge, skills, and interest, and a willingness to operate in an apolitical manner. So that was the reason. That was the reason for the recommendation. I hear the point about presenting to the committee, but the working group didn't see any reason why an independent member couldn't do that. So that was the reason for that proposal. Thanks.
Before we get to other questions, can I ask who was on that working group, please?
Yep, so the working group is made up of myself and various officers from across the MCA.
Okay. Councillor Addison, and then Councillor Bleckensop, and then Councillor Shabalala.
Thank you, Chair. I would normally avoid Me Too type responses, but I do find myself considering that the main WECA committee is a political environment. This is a political environment, and putting an independent member between 2 political environments might put them at somewhat of a disadvantage. So I have to agree with the previous comments that I would be very worried if we went to an independent member as a chair.
Councillor Bleckensop.
Broadly speaking, very similar comments. On the co-chair's proposal, I think there's a technical point around the number 8 in the pack, but that might be better handled later.
The one on 218?
No, because I've got them all separately. I mean point 8 in terms of voting, in the sense of if a vote is deemed tied on any matter is deemed not to be carried, and how that interacts with co-chairs could get a little bit weird.
Well, we'll get to that when we go to the document.
Yeah.
Councillor Shabalala.
Thanks, Chair. I've got 3 questions on this. Steve, I took considerable amount of time to look at the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accounting to really understand that phrase of you've just mentioned it, of the chair should be impartial, and so it does not stipulate that it needs to be an independent person. So is there any reason beyond that? Because I understand that the working group is using that as a statement of justification, but actually when you read the document in its entirety, it does not necessarily position an independent chair more than a councillor chair. So, and also looking at the combined authorities mentioned, there's 15 combined authorities. This looked at 6, so less than half. So the picture is not necessarily clear, and I think for me, my objection is around the narrative. The narrative is more around that it should be mandatory. Is there a reason that this needs to be mandatory? Because the same document that you referenced does not say this is a mandatory position.
No, it's not mandatory, and the working group are not suggesting it is mandatory. It's a proposal at this point based on what the working group considers to be good practice.
Good practice on half the combined authorities across the UK. So it's not a full picture.
No, good practice. I mean, I can't speak for the other combined authorities.
Okay, thanks. And in terms of parts of what was here, is that this role seems to have a lot more influence in terms of they not just only in this audit, but they also join and can attend the other meetings, and they also have voting rights. I mean, they don't have voting rights.
No, they don't have voting rights. Chairman's always been able to attend the main committee. What the working group have done in the new proposal is codify that basically, so it wasn't in the original terms of reference, so it codifies that, which protects the ability then for the chair to be able to attend the main committee, but certainly no voting rights and never has had.
Okay, and so far in terms of the consultation with other local authorities, has this been consented amongst all of them?
No, so the proposal has been shared with the combined authority monitoring officers together with the monitoring officer of North Somerset, on the basis that if they were to join, then they would effectively becoming a member of the combined authority with this constitution. So that's the consultation that we've carried out at the moment.
Thank you. Any more questions before we move on to looking at the actual document itself? Okay, so let's move on to the actual proposed terms of reference starting on page 221. So there are various edits to this in terms of paragraph 1. Does anybody have any changes to propose any amendments to pages 221? No? Okay, we'll move on to page 222, which covers accounts and financial reporting, governance, and internal audit. Any changes? No? Move on to page 223, which covers external audit and standards. Jennifer.
Hi, I had a question, and there may be a couple of these in later sections as well. In terms of the sort of the verbs and things that are using, there's a difference between reviewing something, approving or agreeing something, and then assurance. So the very first bullet point under internal audit on this page says provide assurances. So do we see that as a role of the committee as assurance? Assurance is quite a strong term versus, you know, reviewing, making recommendations, monitoring, etc. You know, assurance is typically associated with the auditors, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the role of the committee. Yeah.
Assurance does have very specific audit connotations, and it's important to actually incorporate that, I think, into the terms of reference. Yeah. So nothing else on 223? Councillor Simon?
The foot of 223 is paragraph F, and then there's some bullet points under it at the top of 224. And that effectively, as I understand it, says that the report of the hearings subcommittee comes to this committee for endorsement and follow-up.
No, that's not the case.
In which case, perhaps it could be looked at again to make clear that these functions are not discharged by this committee. They're finally the work of the hearings committee is final, and therefore the hearings committee, I think, should report to main committee as necessary. Can you have I don't think we need to deal with it in committee, but can we have another look at the drafting of that?
Yeah, we can have a look at that. Just to be clear, the hearings committee doesn't report to anybody. The hearings committee would hear all the evidence, make a decision, and that decision would be final. It can't go to any other committee for ratification because that other committee hasn't heard any of the evidence. So in terms of the hearing committee, their decision would be final, and that's proposed to be dealt with by way of a subcommittee of this authority. But I'm happy to make that clear if you don't think that's sufficiently clear.
Can I clarify?
Yep.
The hearings committee is a subcommittee of the audit committee or the main committee, please?
Of the audit committee.
So it would actually report to this committee as opposed to the main meeting.
Well, it depends what you mean by report. So
if it's empowered to make a decision, it must have to communicate that decision to somebody.
Well, it could, it would certainly, it could certainly publish its decision, but on the basis that it's the hearings committee that hears all the evidence, this committee wouldn't be able to interfere with that decision. But of course, the hearing subcommittee could report back to this committee. The reality is that they would publish a decision notice anyway, which is public.
And that decision notice could include sanctions?
Yes, could include limited sanctions that are currently available under the existing legislation, yes.
It's the word determine in F that gives, I think, stronger than is needed in this, if the hearings committee is making the decisions.
Yeah, in order for this committee to be able to delegate that function to the subcommittee, it has to firstly be a function of this committee, hence why I've put that in there. And then later I've said that the subcommittee will exercise these functions on behalf of the committee.
Can I clarify in terms of this document what member actually means? Does it mean the chair of the combined authority, the mayor, or does it mean the unitary authority leaders who also constitute the committee, or does it mean members of this audit committee or scrutiny?
Member in which context?
The whole section of standards.
So member would be member of this authority. So it would be the mayor and the constituent authority leaders when they're acting in their capacity as members of this authority.
And what about members of audit and scrutiny? How would, if they were deemed to be out of kilter, how would they be dealt with?
There would likely be a report. Well, if a complaint would have effectively a complaint of a breach of the code of conduct would have to be made against them. Yep, that would be the process.
I think that's useful context to understand. Any more questions on page 223?
Sorry, I'm not looking at the page, just looking at the
No, in my preparation, I didn't look at what amendments I'd be kind of focused on this. I just looked at the report. So this is kind of catching me by surprise. And therefore, I'm not looking at the numbers now. I'm just looking at the pretext. Is it 2.8? What number are we on now?
So you're talking about...
Are we on 2.7 standards?
Yes, 2.7 standards.
Standards, thanks.
Any more for 223? No, let's move on to 224 then, please. So the information management and general. Yeah. So 2.8 information management, 2.9 general. And then we go on to section 3, which is membership. And independent persons.
If I may, Chair. Personally, I think 6 years feels very long. I'd like to understand the rationale of someone serving for 6 terms, 6 years. To me, that feels like a very long period. but if the officers, because the working group is officers only.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Seem to feel that 6 years is a justifiable time. I mean, even our election period is not a 6-year window. How is this a 6-year window and it doesn't necessarily coincide with election period in any one way or not? Or is it that it's meant not to reflect with election period? I think just 6 years is just way too long. So any justification on that, I think would be really helpful. And then the other one on C, just 3.1, and then you've got C there. It says that the person's appointment has been approved by a majority of the members of the authority. So in that sense, it feels like it can happen out there, and then there's a representative here, and we don't necessarily, as David had mentioned earlier, it doesn't feel like the committee in itself is making the decision about the independent person. That feels rather a top-down approach, and definitely, from what I've heard, doesn't feel like anything that this committee supports.
It's statutory, I'm afraid. So that's a statutory requirement. So it's for the main committee to make appointments to committees. And what the regulations say in relation to the independent person is that they have to be appointed by the main committee.
But that's the independent person. It's not the independent person to be chairing.
Sorry, I'm not following.
So is it
any independent person would have to be appointed by the main committee? Yeah, whether they were the chairman or not. Yeah.
But it does not necessarily mean that by them being appointed in that process means that they are chairing. So where is the chairing role selected? Is it? Thank you.
Can I also qualify about independent persons?
Yeah.
That if, for instance, an independent person was appointed for 6 years and they only turned up 10% of the time, we could remove them. Is there scope for that in terms of reference? And the same could be applied to political members as well.
Not in relation to the independent person. Of course, the political members are appointed annually by your own council anyway. So you would assume that if they weren't attending the meetings, then the constituent authority would then look to appoint somebody else in their place.
So how would the MCA deal with non-attendance by independent people?
I think, in the same way that that's dealt with now, it would need to be a conversation with the independent person. There's no provision, as far as I'm aware.
Does it need to be formally recognised? Because they could contest that they've been appointed for 6 years and I'm only turning up for 10% of the time.
They wouldn't be appointed for 6 years. The initial appointment would be for 3 years. Right. What it says is there's the maximum could be 2 terms of 3 years. It wouldn't be an appointment for 6 years.
Okay. Councillor Simon?
Just to follow that up, there needs to be provision for removal from office, if only if they're disqualified in some way, e.g. being made bankrupted.
Yeah. So if they no longer met the statutory definition of an independent person, then they would no longer be qualified. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but the terms of reference here doesn't talk about an initial appointment for 3 years and then qualifying it.
So if that's not in there, we can make that clear. But it's 2 terms. The proposal is for 2 terms of 3 years, so a maximum period of 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah, that might be clarified within 3.1 then, please.
Yeah.
Any more questions about 225? Councillor Simon? Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to 226, which covers some of the independent persons. Oh, we said it 3 years, it does on page 226. Okay, and then move on to political balance. Any questions on that? Councillor Williams and then Councillor Simon.
This is thinking ahead, really, because it refers to political parties. At the moment, nobody's been elected as an different sort of independent councillor in Bristol. I don't think in South Gloucestershire. I think there's 1 or 2. in the rural parts of Baines, but North Somerset has quite a lot. So we need to have something in here about how political balance would reflect independence. At the moment, I'm guessing they simply don't reach the required level to be represented amongst the current 3 authorities, but when North Somerset comes in, they probably will.
Yeah, so the definition of what's a group, etc., is set out in secondary legislation. Yeah, so that does guide the political proportionality calculation.
Just to be clear, I think there are Portishead independents. I think there are other sorts of independents in North Somerset, but they do get together as a voting bloc. So you think that is covered by both the primary legislation and this constitution?
It depends how many. I think off the top of my head, I'm not sure how many are required for a group. But I can certainly look at that, and if it's not covered, then I can address that.
I think that'd be useful. Councillor Simon?
Yes, I think that if you change political parties to political groups, you get around that difficulty. We have 2 independent groups making 7 or 8 members at the moment within Baines. But what I really want to address was, if the constituent authorities appoint on a politically proportional basis, is it up to this authority to superimpose an overall political balance, which adds up the political balance within its 3 or 4 constituent authorities? Seems to me that either political balance should be at unitary authority level, which is my preference, or you have to say that the combined authority tells the unitary authorities which groups should be nominating. I'm not sure it's a workable arrangement. That I think we should refer that for further thought.
Yeah, I'll pass it to Tim, who does the political proportionality calculation every year.
Yes, so at the moment, the combined authority calculates the numbers of councillors for each political group across the 3 unitary authorities, and extrapolates how many from each group should be appointed to the 2 committees on the combined authority, the overview and scrutiny, the audit committees. So with 11, I think overall across the region, we ask the unitary authorities to provide that number across the 3 authorities. Obviously, we've got to take into account the political balance of each of those unitary authorities as well. So some of the political groups are stronger in some of the authorities than in the others. So there's not a political balance for each authority, but there is across all 3 when the numbers are taken together. Also, there's different numbers of councillors that represent each authority depending on the population of those authority areas.
I think that whole area needs further thought.
Yes, I agree with you. I think it would be good to see a minimum or a maximum number, just in terms of the rationale, because you can work out a ratio in one way or another, and then from a ratio, then you can have a list justification. So it really is a bit more transparent. What is the political balance ratio on low to high? At the moment, it's subjective.
I'm not sure you could do that, because the political balance would depend on the political parties and the number from each individual group at each of the unitary authorities. So
you could provide some sort of ratio, just regardless of political parties, you could provide some sort of ratio, that it to be 1, it to be 2, it to be 3. You can provide some sort of guidance. I think right now, as my colleague is saying, it's very much subjective. You can't tell if there's going to be more or less of the same number that is represented here.
Okay, so okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Further thought.
Yeah, okay. We can give that some further thought. I mean, that's just quoting the statutory requirement there, and there is a statutory way of calculating political balance. So obviously that would change regularly, the political balance potentially. So I'm not sure what else we can do with that, but we can give that some thought.
So political balance is based on the actual size of the committee, and it's looking back at page 225, it says the combined authority shall decide the size and membership of the audit committee. So if, for instance, another unitary authority was to join, would this committee expand by 25%?
Potentially, that would be a matter for that would obviously be a matter for the main committee.
Would the audit committee be part of that conversation?
Yeah, I'm sure the committee could make a recommendation to the main committee. Yeah, it's just in there really to try and future-proof from others joining. Whereas if we've got a set number of members and then North Somerset do join, effectively we've got the same number of members, but we've got more constituent authorities.
Does that need to be written down in the terms of reference?
That the audit committee will make a recommendation. Yeah, we can do that.
Any more on that section? So we'll move on to 3.3, the chair and the vice chair. Councillor Addison, you reacted first before Simon.
Yeah, I had a couple of concerns with this section. The first one being the West of England Combined Authority shall appoint the chair of the committee on an annual basis, which seems, I mean, if this means the main committee, it seems that they are being allowed to appoint their own auditor effectively, or head chief of the audit committee, and that seems somewhat concerning. And the second one is that, as previously mentioned, the chair of the committee shall be an independent person. I would suggest we remove that for now and leave it up to the committee to decide who their chair should be, unless there's a good reason otherwise.
Okay, can I clarify, in previous instances of electing a chair, it's actually the audit committee that elects the chair, not the combined authority committee?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, so that proposal is just because it links with the proposal for the chair to be independent, and of course the independent persons have to be appointed by the main committee. But obviously, if that's not something you support, then we can make that clear to the main committee.
Even if it's an independent person who is the chair, I think audit committee needs to be assertive about who it wants to be the chair. It can't have a chair that's imposed upon them that they don't think they can work with. Councillor Simon.
Yes, I'd like to propose a formal amendment to those two sentences to the effect that the committee shall elect co-chairs, one of whom shall be an independent person, and one of whom shall be a constituent council representative at each meeting, at its first meeting in the municipal year.
So I think we have two alternative amendments being proposed here. One is that the chair of the audit committee shall be an independent person is removed from the terms of reference, and your amendment. So how do we want to proceed? Councillor Bleckensell.
Well, I'd be happy that we consider first removal of the sentence about independent person, and then see whether there's support for the idea of co-chairs.
Councillor Bleckensell.
Just to note with regards again to section 8 on voting, if we were to go for the co-chairs option, that section will need to be amended as well, because it makes specific reference to a vice chair.
Indeed, yes. Councillor Addison.
I was also proposing that we remove the first sentence and just have the committee shall appoint a chair of the committee at its first meeting without any further complications.
So I think the first proposal is to delete the first sentence and delete the second sentence and add a sentence saying the committee shall appoint a chair. Is that correct? So can I have votes against that?
We got a seconder.
Oh yes, proposer and seconder. Tom, are you proposing or seconding? Proposing, okay. So can I have votes against? This is removing the first sentence, the West of England Combined Authority shall appoint a chair of the committee, and removing the sentence, the chair of the committee shall be an independent person, to replace it with the audit committee shall appoint the chair. Yeah, so can I have anybody who wants to vote against that? Anybody who wishes to abstain? And anybody who wants to vote for those amendments, please. So that's unanimous about the political members. You abstain. I'm not sure, do independent members actually get a vote? Yes, they do? Good, okay. Thank you. Just clarifying that. That probably needs to go in here as well. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't catch you. Independent there. Abstain. So has that been noted? Steve? Yeah, thank you. Page 227, the commit.
So I'm proposing that the committee shall elect a co-chairs, one of whom shall be an independent person and the other should be a constituent authority representative.
Can we have some more ideas about how that might actually work in practice in terms of chairing the meeting and who, and in terms of voting rights as well?
Well, both would have voting rights. There's no provision for casting vote. I would expect the co-chairs to agree how to chair, meeting chairing should work. It might rotate, it might always be one, but I wouldn't want to specify that.
Absence.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to raise any issues? Councillor Clark?
I'm not sure I follow the reason. So say if they agree that one person's always going to chair the meeting, what is the benefit of having the co-chair? I'd just like to understand that a bit more.
Councillor Simon, do you want to?
Yes, I think the advantage of having co-chairs is that it does give a status to the independent member who is in the co-chair position, that if there was an issue where the views of an independent were particularly important, they had that status, they would be able to speak on behalf of the committee at main committee, since I would say that both had the right to attend main committee. It goes some way to achieving the proposal of an independent chair without taking away the existence of a political chair as well. That's why co-chairing works. I mean, I sit as co-chair of the Standards Committee in Baines, and largely the work is done by the independent chair, but I do have a role in taking certain issues and certainly in reporting to council, sorry.
Any more questions about the concept of a co-chair? So can I have a proposer of the concept of co-chair? Okay. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Shabalala? Okay. Let's move on to voting then, unless anybody wants to raise any more questions. So who would like to vote against the concept of a co-chair? 7 against. And who would like to vote for? Thank you very much. So, okay, let's move on to page 226. Oh, have I got? I'll skip forward. No, I haven't. No, then move on to page 227, which considers about the vice chair. The committee shall appoint a vice chair of the committee at its first meeting following the annual meeting of the combined authority. I think that's a given. And the chair of the audit committee has a standing invitation to attend meetings of the West Evington Combined Authority. Any
I think it's implicit in what we've decided that the word chair and vice chair go into that first sentence.
Yes. Yes. Everybody agree with that? Okay, let's go on to subcommittees. Any questions? The hearing subcommittee. We've already made some discussion points about that. Moving on to page 228. Any questions? Subcommittees finished with. Meeting frequency. Any questions about that?
This is a late amendment. I think 5.2 needs looking at again, particularly if it's expanded.
It should just say one member from each of the constituency councils. Does that sound plausible? Do we need to vote on that? No?
So proposing it doesn't say 3 members from amongst the audit committee to
Yeah.
include at least 1 member. It just says 1 member from each of the audit committees.
One member of each of the unitary authorities. Do we need to include something about political balance in there? So they couldn't all be one party, for instance?
Yeah, we've got something in there about the subcommittees needing to be politically proportional, I think. So.
Right, okay. That's covered then, good. And of course, an independent member as well. Anything else about subcommittees? Meeting frequency then? Quorum on page 229. Certainly.
5.3, the independent member is appointed as chair of subcommittee. Isn't that the chairing would be subjective to the subcommittee in itself to decide who chairs, and not a stipulation that an independent member is appointed chair of a subcommittee?
So if it works in the way the same does as in the unitary authority in terms of hearing, is that the chair of the so the Values and Ethics Committee is an independent person anyway, so that it can't be deemed to be a political decision about whatever comes before the hearings committee. Okay. So keeping it as an independent person is a valid case point, I think, in that response.
So this subcommittee, this piece is only in specific to the hearing subcommittee?
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody happy with that? Good. Okay, moving on to 229 quorum and voting. Councillor Bleckenshall.
It's just a quick one, just to clarify, because it seems a little bit unusual for me that the chair does not get a casting vote and a tie is deemed to have fallen. So I just wondered if the rationale for that could briefly be set out.
It's statutory. Yep, it's in our order. It says the chair shall not have casting vote.
Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you. Conflicts of interest, going on to page 230. Everybody's familiar with the member code of conduct, I presume. And the requests to audit committee. That's never actually been invoked that a mayor has asked an audit committee to look at stuff, is it?
Not that I'm aware of.
No. Useful to have, though. Attendance of the committee. Any more officers? Do we want to specify the mayor should attend, for instance, like they do to the first half of the scrutiny committee? Would anybody like to propose that?
I'm happy to propose that, Chair.
Anybody prepared to second that one? Councillor Shubashala and Councillor Addison both put that. So Councillor Simon?
I'm very happy that we invite the mayor, but to put an expectation in normally attend seems to me a bit strong. I'd rather that we put something like the mayor may attend, or the mayor is shall always be invited to attend, or something like that. You know, I don't want to put an expectation on how we use the mayor's time.
Councillor Addison.
Thank you, Chair. The attendance of the mayor at the scrutiny committee is purely to answer specific questions for the first 15 minutes to half hour. I think I agree with the previous statement that expecting them to sit through the entire audit committee when they've probably already been briefed on a lot of the topics might be an undue imposition on their time. But if there's specific questions to answer at the beginning, I think that's potentially quite useful.
Can I suggest an alternative proposal that audit committee can request the mayor to attend for specific instances, items, if it's deemed necessary? So my proposal is that we can have the capability of asking the mayor to attend.
Can I just double check? You said if it's deemed necessary. If that, I think that wording would be useful to be in there.
So the audit committee could vote to ask the mayor to attend.
Yeah, where they deem it necessary.
Yeah. Almost certainly, yes, opposed to invoking them to attend immediately. So the wording, can I propose the wording? Yep.
Can I check if that was in alignment with when audit has an annual review? Would that be of some use? Because then we know an audit is coming through with the annual review, and maybe there's some things that is looking at the whole year cycle. If it's once a term, that.
So the annual government statement already comes to the main committee and is signed off by the main committee.
Okay.
And that is the form of the main report for audit committee.
Yeah.
So they already get visibility of that. But if there is a specific item that this committee should deem that the mayor could attend, it would be useful. So the wording would be that the audit committee can request the attendance of the chair of the combined authority to attend for a specific item on the agenda. So I propose that. Who would like to second it? Councillor Simon, thank you very much. All those that want to vote against that proposal? All those that want to abstain? All those for? Thank you very much. I think that's unanimous. The annual report. We've already... Pardon?
still going through the draft. You're still going through this.
Yeah. I think we moved on to the.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're sort of one annual report on page 230. Yep. This is complicated and slightly onerous, but still. Annual report, no questions. Procedure at meetings. And that's the final bit. So does anybody have any other further amendments they want to make to the terms of reference that have not been discussed? No? So we move on to the recommendations, which are on page 213 of that report, that the Audit Committee endorsed the amended terms of reference of the Audit Committee as amended by this committee, attached at Appendix 1 of this report, and note that the Constitution Review Working Group, proposed changes are intended to be presented to the West of England Combined Authority Committee for formal approval as a change to the Constitution. Do we need to vote on the amended document?
I think on the basis that you've voted on the individual changes, I'm clear, and I'm sure that Tim's also made a note of those. So,
cool.
Yep.
So we're endorsing it, so we still need to vote according to paragraph 1. So can I have a proposer? Councillor Blenkinsop had his hand up, I think, and a seconder, Councillor Simon. So all those against? No. All those who want to abstain? And all those who want to endorse this report, amended report. Thank you very much. It's unanimous. The committee agreed to hold an extraordinary meeting of the Audit Committee in late April 2026 to consider further proposals from the working group relating to other provisions for the amendments to the Constitution beyond the Audit Committee's terms of reference. So it looks like we're meeting again. Has that meeting actually been scheduled in people's diaries?
No, Chair. I mean, if members have their diaries now, maybe it could be a good opportunity to decide upon a date for that meeting. I don't know if Steve has a particular date in which.
I think, sorry, Chair, I think we're going to have to do it offline because we're already at 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's time to go into people's diaries. So we'll meet again.
Yes. Is it possible that the working group minutes are also brought when we do have the main meeting?
I think that would be very useful context. And a full list of the members of the working group would also be useful, I think. And any comments that be made by the monitoring officers of the unitary authorities, I think would also be useful context. Councillor Williams.
Point of order, Chair. We were scheduled to finish at 1. We still got quite a lot of things to get through. I have to go back to City Hall for a meeting shortly. I think Councillor Clark is in the same position, just checking your quoracy requirements.
We need 9 for quoracy, and I think if you guys left, we would still be quorate.
I will also need to leave, I'm afraid.
Okay. So we're about to lose quoracy, I think. And we still have item 16, 17 and 18 and 19 and 20 and 21s to go through.
Yeah, if we're not going to be quorate, then unfortunately we won't be able to conduct that business. So we will need to adjourn and carry that business forward.
So we've already talked about an extraordinary meeting. Could we cover those items at the extraordinary meeting?
Yes, I don't see why not. That's going to be another long meeting, but
I think it was considering we've got 5 more things to discuss. So can I propose that those items come to the extraordinary meeting that's going to be scheduled? Is everybody happy, agreed with that? Got nods of assent. So it is 1:05. I'd like to thank members for attending. And one thing I did forget at Public Forum was to wish Dave Redgewell and Rosa Kell, who are both ill and couldn't attend, our best wishes, and hope they can attend future meetings. Thank you very much, everybody.